me start streaming. I'll leave the audio going for a second.
Both of them. Just tell me when so I can talk and then you can talk.
No, we've talked a little bit on the live stream.
Oh,
now,
okay.
so
We already have.
You should be getting it. What's up, everyone? Got a couple people here. Of course, we got to wait for the audio to catch up because of the delay.
Travis is in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like we got a couple people. Oh, Cody as well. How's it going, everyone? Okay, let me get the...
Travis, Cody, and Magnus.
How's it going, everyone? Can you guys hear us all right?
Yeah, both of us. Cody's watching Harry Potter with his... Something you need to do.
Yeah, I was just getting derided about that last night, the fact that I hadn't seen those.
Oh, yeah, someone was giving you crap?
Yeah.
Good. You deserve crap. Copious amounts. Cody says...
All right, just one more second, guys. I'm just getting the audio ready for starting the show. How's everyone doing in the old chat?
Hey, congratulations, Travis. You just had a baby boy.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations.
Boone.
What?
Travis's last name is Boone.
Oh.
Boone. I don't remember what that remember what show that's from, but I just remember someone yelling it. Boone. Busy boy, Travis. 2 kids in 2 years. Now you gotta do what my mom did and have a third one next year.
All right. I think the tablet here got some update of some kind. Everything's looking different than it did. Just trying to make sure everything's set and ready to go. All right, so we will go ahead and hit the intro real quick and get started for roundtable number 59.
59, jeez.
Yeah, we're getting almost to a big one, I guess. 60. I mean, I don't know how many episodes we actually have now. At some point, see, that's the thing, is how do we count it? Do we count like just roundtables, or do we count them all together? Like when we get to the point where we're going to get to a 100th episode at some point, right?
I think we need to count the 100th episode between book clubs and roundtables, and we need to do a roundtable and have a celebration.
Yeah, because that'd be coming up pretty soon. The only thing I'd have to do is make sure I delete some, because there's some times we did some announcements by releasing like a short podcast, letting people know about like live streams and stuff. I have to delete those, make sure those didn't get counted, but. Yeah, I don't think we're quite to 100 or even necessarily totally close to it yet, but we're probably getting closer. So let's go ahead and we'll mute ourselves real quick and then get some intro action going.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, but not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland to the Dark Tower came.
We are quartet, one from many. The palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's Magnum Opus, The Dark Tower series. My name is Tad.
And I'm Peter.
And we're here for roundtable number 59. And we right up front, I guess we can apologize. We had some kerfuffles with scheduling when we were going to do our last show, and then we were going to bump it to last week, and that didn't work out either. So we'll just call that our summer vacation. I know some of my podcasts I listen to take a couple weeks break for whatever. So I guess we'll call that our summer vacation last episode. So apologies that we weren't with you last time, but things have been pretty crazy.
Yeah, we cry your pardon.
Yeah, indeed. So we're here for roundtable number 59, though, and I think that between some of the stuff that's happened since that episode, I think we will have maybe more of a full episode in terms of news and stuff like that. But yeah, so let's get into the intros first, and then we'll get discussing on what's going on in the Dark Tower realm and also the Stephen King realm a tiny bit, of course, because we tend to always blur the lines a tiny bit there.
It's just a different level of the tower.
Yeah, indeed. And there's a lot going on with Stephen King right now. It's pretty crazy. So first off, we want to warn you guys about spoilers. If you're new to the show, we want to let you know that the roundtable episodes, we will spoil freely of the 7 primary books, and anything. We always say the 7 primary books. Of course, we have the 8th novel as well, which we still might spoil, and the comic books and all the side stuff, short stories. We can spoil any of that stuff. It's kind of hard to say, so we give ourselves a latitude to say if you haven't finished it, the whole story, you probably really want to be careful. But if you haven't done all the side stuff, you may want to be mindful that we might spoil something if the conversation goes that route. I do know that one of the articles we're going to get into today also does have some light spoilers for other Stephen King stuff, which we generally avoid. And I think I skipped some of them, but I still think a few small ones might slip in. But yeah, so just be warned about that. Next up is if you want to find our podcast, you can do that a number of places. The primary way for podcasts in general is iTunes. And if you could be so kind as to subscribe, rate, and review us there, we would appreciate that. You could also stream us on Stitcher, and you could also find us on any various podcast service that exists out there, which there are a ton. And if you can if you also check out our show notes at darktowerpalaver.com, all of the articles that we go over, and I believe we have some media stuff if we get that deep into the emails. We might this episode, or it might be next episode, but anything that we share or talk about, if you're not listening, or if you're not watching the live, or if you're not with us live watching YouTube to see what's on the screen, or going back and watching that in the future, looking back at the old episodes, the best way to see what Peter is seeing and I'm seeing in the studio is at darktowerpalaver.com, as well as finding all the articles, because I cut them all up and only get what I want for the conversation. So if you want to read the whole thing, go ahead and check out the show notes and check out the articles. And also, this is a quartet, and you guys are part of that quartet, so we want you to be part of this discussion, and Peter can let you know the best way to do that.
So the best way to do that is through email. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. We also have Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. And then follow us on the Twitter. It's at darktowerpod. That's at darktowerpod. And then, like Ted already said, we stream our shows on YouTube. It's youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. Now, that means that you can tune in live if you subscribe and click the little bell to get notifications from us. Or you can check out old shows that we have on there. If you look for book club episodes on the old shows, you're going to be out of luck. Ted can tell you why.
Yeah, because we have the Frank Muller stuff in our podcast. If you listen to the podcast, you know that. We have sound clips with the great Frank Muller, and eventually we'll have some different authors as well, up to and including Stephen King himself when we get into the 8th book. So with that, those things are obviously copyrighted, and that will flag with the algorithms on YouTube and get the video removed pretty much instantly. So because of that, with the book club episodes, we record live on YouTube, but the episodes never get posted for future watch because they'll just get pulled down.
Yep.
In some cases, I've even had notifications telling me about it before I even posted or tried to post them, and they preemptively ban the video basically, or pull the video down, which is kind of weird. But so there's that. So yeah, we'll stick with the normal podcast if you want to do book clubs. So one of the big things that's happened since our last episode is Castle Rock.
Yes.
So have you watched said show?
3 episodes so far.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of caught you off guard a little bit, didn't it?
I believe we're at, I think this last week, was it the 5th episode that aired?
I got behind, so I'm going to have to finish it when I get a chance.
I haven't watched the newest episode yet, and we're not going to get too deep into it. I just wanted to talk a little bit about it in general with Castle Rock. We actually have some news articles that kind of touch on it a tiny bit. Did you notice anything with what you watched Dark Tower-wise with the first couple episodes that you watched?
Crap, there was something and I forgot to write it down. There was one thing, and I definitely forgot it.
The one thing I noticed in the intro, the opening credits, you have Chapter 19 showing on...
It was something in the credits. There was another one.
Part of the montage, it shows a page of a book, and it is on Chapter 19.
I'm going to have to double-check what mine was. I'll watch the credits really closely, but mine was from the credits as well.
Yeah, and Travis says he's going to wait for the whole season to be finished to watch. Yeah, that's what I should have done, really.
I think that's the best way, is that we were talking about this with the potential Amazon show for Dark Tower, how we're going to do it, because Amazon will drop all at once.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do, I think what would be best is if we do an episode by episode breakdown, and then people can listen to it at their leisure.
Yeah.
But for Castle Rock,
but it's for us though.
Yeah.
Is more what I'm concerned about. So are we going to wait and only watch the episodes that we're going to talk about?
No, of course not.
No?
No, absolutely not. No, you could restrict me on news.
Is it going to be tough though to have a discussion about an older episode when you have more episodes? Because that'd be my biggest concern.
Oh, you're worried about us slipping? No, we do just fine with book clubs.
Not just slipping, but it's a matter of even you lose some of that idea of speculation of things is this foreshadowing for this, things like that. There's a lot you lose with being able to watch the whole thing at once, I guess. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking at, where it's is it foreshadowing? Oh my God, are we going to see this? It's going to be disingenuous if we've already watched the whole show when we're doing a podcast.
So let's do one episode at a time then.
That would be tough, but
or what we could do is well, you know, that would be part of our shows is we would have to suspend book clubs to get through it. I mean, 10, 12 episodes.
And we might have to go weekly when it first drops to get through it as quick as possible. Yeah. I mean, hopefully here soon we'll hear something about a green lighting, and also it'd be nice to hear about things like maybe episode count, because now you're getting to the point where you're starting to see a lot of these online places that are now starting to maybe go closer towards like an 8 episode to 10 episode series instead of like a 13 to 15 episode. So that's kind of interesting to see where we're going to be with that. I'm trying to think with book 4, I wonder what kind of episodes you really need to tell that story. I mean, I want as much as they can give me, so I don't really know, but I'm like, what is required? What do you think? Do you think they can get away with it in 8 episodes?
I think at least 10.
Yeah.
I said that before. We kind of talked about this a little bit.
But we were kind of assuming that there'd be some stuff added in, right? Some Gilead stuff.
Or maybe some stuff coming back from Magus.
Yeah. But if they just went bare bones and went strictly
8
book, I think they could probably do 8 episodes and get everything they need to.
Roland's trial and Arrival in Magus could be one episode, one book.
Well, because I know like 11/22/63 didn't have 8 episodes, and that's
I thought it had 10.
That's like a 1,000-page book, right?
Yeah,
I thought it was only 8, but either way, I look at things.
There was parts that could be cut out of 11/22/63 that still made it to where it was a coherent story.
Yeah.
But book 4, Roland arriving in Magus is the end of episode 1. The dinner and the showdown of the Traveler's Rest is episode 2. I'm meeting the sheriff and all that stuff that happens in between.
Yeah.
The showdown at the Traveler's Rest would be the end of episode 2. And then episode 3 would be kind of the boring episode where Roland and Susanna dance around each other a little bit.
You'd have like the investigating and stuff going on too, right?
He asked her to meet her at like Sitco.
But also, you could
apologize.
You can even add it into where the other guys are doing investigating,
watching
and stuff.
Roy going on the back trail.
Yeah, I mean, you could even change up some stuff from the book a tiny bit. Maybe make some of the stuff that Roland finds, give some of it to the side characters to do while the love story is going on.
I mean, hell, we could even have a scene where we watch Alan and Cuthbert count nets. 1, 2, 3.
Hey, with Cuthbert involved, it would be
still be hilarious.
It would be entertaining. Yeah, it would be. So I haven't really seen a whole lot in the in Castle Rock. I honestly, most of the things for me would have been stretches. There's names, for instance, the main character's name is Henry. Kind of obviously rang some Dark Towerish to me. And there's also a character that has the last name Chambers that's in like a couple scenes is all. It's not even a big character. So it's just like small things to me where I'm like, oh, Chambers, oh, Henry, like, but like there's been nothing in my mind that's jumped out where it's like, hey, Dark Tower, for me, there hasn't been. So
there was one for me, but it's kind of a spoiler, so I don't want to go into it.
Yeah. I haven't noticed a whole lot. I feel like everything I've seen has been more stretches, but so that's happened since we recorded last. We actually didn't know they would be dropping 3 episodes in the opening week.
You didn't.
Well, no, we didn't when we were talking about it last. Because Hulu's generally been one that they hold it pretty tight, where it's like one episode at a time because they want to milk that out as long as possible.
Yeah,
I've watched a couple of their different shows, and
I found out after we recorded last. My wife let me know. She's like, Castle Rock's dropping 3 episodes on opening on their first time. I was like, oh, they are. Oh, well, Ted already knows about this. And then you text me like, did you watch Castle Rock? I was like, yeah, I only watched the first episode so far. You're like, wait, what? I was like, they dropped 3.
Well, and it's because Hulu always has that, like, the special features shit that they have with all their shows, where
the behind the scenes, and
where it'll show you after that, like, it's like watch next, and like, so it showed me watch next, but I just assumed that those are all special features. Yeah, so they dropped the 3, and then they had one more episode drop for the weekly thing, and then the second one was this week. So yeah, I think we're on episode 5 now is what's out. I've only watched the first 4 personally, but
Travis's suggestion that we go episode by episode, he says it'd be better to see us speculate and
because I feel like that's the magic of TV. That's the only
predict.
As a huge fan of like the streaming age and stuff. I'm a early age cord cutter and stuff. I love it, but I do hate the loss of some of this stuff. Like the one that really put it into perspective for me was True Detective. Like just watching that live and seeing all the speculation stuff involved, I was just like, yeah, I'm not getting this on anything on Netflix. Like, you just can't.
One of your favorite shows of all time. You watched Breaking Bad live, so you were really in. There was a huge party.
Yeah.
For when it finished, you told me one time about was it a season finale or a series finale where you had to go to Idaho for a wedding?
Oh, that was for Breaking Bad. It was because season 5 is broken into 2 halves, right? So one, aired a year apart. So it was the last year. So 5B, season 5B, the premiere of that season.
Yeah,
we were up in Idaho for a friend's wedding, and the drive from Idaho to here is not a short one. And like
it's easily just to the border. It's about 3 hours.
Yeah, and then we were up a ways. We were way further north in like I don't know what it's like Twin Falls and stuff. I want to say we were even further north in Boise. So it was an all-day drive, and it was one of those things that we looked at the GPS and it was like going to get us there like an hour after it aired. So we're like, all right, we're going to speed. And we went like 95 like the whole way down, and like we had the GPS the whole time. Like every like 15, 20 minutes, I was like, okay, it's saying we'll arrive at this time. Same with and we eventually got to the point where we arrived like 10 minutes after it started. But I mean, the
DVR.
We had a whole party that was coming, and we had the DVR, so we were like 10 minutes behind everyone, but of like the live audience. But we ended up getting there, shaving almost an entire hour off of our drive. So yeah, that was pretty nuts. So let's see. So yeah, I'm honestly down with that. I really am. And I think I'd have the self-controlled. I mean, honestly, half the time I don't have as much time to sit down and watch like huge binges anyway, like I used to. So honestly, it wouldn't be. I mean, like I said, I'm behind on Castle Rock. I haven't had a chance to watch the episode this week. So
same here.
Yeah, so it's just one of those like I don't think it'd be hard for me to just be like, okay, yeah, watch one episode we could record, watch another episode we could record, and then
we come in. We come in right before episode 6, where we were left on a cliffhanger on episode 5. Sorry guys, we didn't get a chance to watch it. We're going to do a book club this week.
Hashtag Peter is terrible.
All of a sudden, all the chat just fills up with just char you tree. That's all it says.
Oh, char you tree.
You got it out on me way before I got it out on you.
Exactly.
Man, that's crazy.
Peter is terrible. Hits first this time. And then what does Travis say here? But if a season review is the way to go, make notes of theories and spice the review with them. Yeah, and that's one way. But I think we could really do it real time. I really think that. I mean, in terms of like save episodes, I mean, a lot of you guys listening, we wouldn't, ask you guys to do the same thing, but just know if you're going to engage us in those episodes that we're going to be talking strictly about one episode, and we will hold ourselves back to be kind of watching it real time, because I really think it would make for better content in general. We're kind of forcing into like the whole realm of like and ultimately, how much can you speculate because we're reading, it's an adaptation of a book. We know the story, but it will be interesting to go through and be able to take it in smaller bites rather than try to like eat the whole thing over the course of like a one-day binge and then record an episode and go, hey, here's the whole fucking season.
And we don't know if they're going to change anything. I mean, it's entirely possible that, Alan gets killed. It's entirely possible that Cuthbert gets killed.
Hey, you watch your mouth.
I'm just saying.
You watch your mouth.
It's entirely possible that they take these liberties because this is starting fresh basically for for the Amazon Prime,
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then Travis says I watched all of Breaking Bad until the last season, but then I had caught up on the show. So for the last season, I watched it week by week. And yeah, I can't remember where exactly I started watching live. I want to say it was midway through season 4, which I think is the obviously one of the most intense seasons of television ever. And maybe I watched the whole thing live, and that was insane. So watching 4, 5, and 5B was like insane to watch live. But
Travis says he's okay with a 10-hour podcast.
Yeah.
I don't think my stomach would do that.
I think
that well.
To me, it's not even necessarily the length of the podcast, but it's just one of those things. If you're going to like consume the entire thing and try to put it all out in a podcast, there's going to be stuff you miss.
Yeah,
like I listen to like Star Wars podcasts and stuff, and like they'll spend a year and a half to 2 years breaking down a movie after it comes out, because it's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, you got like your top layer stuff, and then you go down and you start to like cut layer by layer, and eventually you're 2 years later and you've for a 2-hour movie, and I feel like it's with that, like if we did the whole season and did one podcast, it'd be a huge cheat to the showrunners and the creators and everything else. So in my mind, the Magnus says I can't help it. I'm watching them one at a time. Wednesdays are boring for me. Yeah, I really wish it was that way for me. I actually have a job change coming up, and that might change my hours a tiny bit, and it might actually give me a little bit better ability to like do things like maybe watch an episode per week or whatever. But and then it doesn't help that I'm also I finally got into watching Jessica Jones season 2.
About time.
So I got
So
that.
as soon as you finish that, you got to go to Luke Cage season 2.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think what else. There's just been so much going. I mean, I guess there's still movies coming out constantly. So I don't know.
We're going to a movie tonight.
Yeah, we're going to, and it's actually interesting. I was thinking about it today as I was finishing up like the last bit of show prep. I thought about it honestly. So the movie's The Meg, about the giant shark and stuff. And what's interesting is I really feel like that's a huge precursor to this podcast.
It is,
because
it's actually
I
a
feel like
stepping stone.
I feel like that was the breaking of the ice of knowing that you were a reader around that, because it's one of those things that in general I don't think you assume everyone's readers because there's just so many people that aren't. And I feel like I was reading it. I think you saw the cover or something and asked about it, and I was just like, whatever. Then you started reading it. I'm like, oh, okay, so he's a reader. And like, if it wasn't for that, it could have been delayed heavily in terms of our friendship of like me getting into like Stephen King and stuff.
It was the first stepping stone our sophomore year to getting us to where you were by the end of sophomore year. You had me reading Salem's Lot right in May. Yeah, and then going into the summer is when I started reading Stephen King heavily, because I remember June was the summer between sophomore and junior year when I went to Barnes and Noble and I bought Carrie and Christine. Or Carrie and
I've been thinking about watching Christine, the movie, the Carpenter movie.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that one recently.
But Carrie's the second book I read. I read it in one night, and then this third book was. I don't think it was The Stand. I think you told me to avoid The Stand. The big ones.
Yeah.
First, no, I think The Stand was the third one.
Yeah.
I think it was, because I was like, I'm ready. And you're like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. So I dove into The Stand. And then after I finished The Stand, you're like, okay, here, read this. It's going to be different, but read it. And that's when I read Gunslinger.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that like I guess it's not necessarily even saying, because we were in school, so it's not necessarily that people don't read, but reading for pleasure, I guess, is the thing. Yeah. So it was interesting thinking about that today. I'm like, okay, we're gonna go see that movie after we record tonight. I'm like, in a lot of ways, the Meg was the name of the book. They changed it to The Meg for the movie, but Meg the book is probably one that was a huge precursor to the like where we're at now with being two guys doing a Dark Tower podcast. So that's kind of interesting, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the movie tonight. And
Travis says that a Carpenter sure knows how to frame a shot. It doesn't disappoint. Carpenter is easily one of my favorite directors.
I think I don't think there's a better horror director than him. And some people knee-jerk reaction would be to say Hitchcock, but I would say that Hitchcock's not a horror director. He's done a couple horror movies, but think about how many other movies he's done. Yeah. He does like suspense thrillers, which I don't think is horror. I think that's a different genre.
You can't count Psycho as a horror movie.
No, I think that one you can.
I don't know.
And that one and Birds, but when you start looking at all of his others, North by Northwest, Vertigo, Rear Window, those aren't horror movies.
No.
So like a majority of his movies, Rope, like there's so many of his movies, they're not horror movies.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're looking at strictly horror, I was talking about somebody at work, I threw that out at them and they're like, well, maybe Wes Craven. I'm like, I like Wes, I really do. And he's definitely like great, but like, he has so many bad movies, like true. Carpenter, maybe he doesn't have as many movies, but almost every one of them are quality in my opinion.
Yeah, look at the first two Halloweens. Did he do the second?
No,
he didn't do the second. He
helped write it.
He helped write it, but he didn't direct it.
Yeah.
And then The Thing is
one of the greatest of all time. The Fog, Christine. Yeah, he's just done so many great ones. So I love him. Travis also said Breaking Bad gets better and better as this show goes. I just rewatched it for the 5th time and it's perfect. Yeah, I'm with you. Every viewing opens new doors to characters and how they make decisions. Yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely agree. It does get better for sure. Okay, so a little bit of some tangents there, but yeah, it's so it's always fun to have some tangents involved.
We love tangents at Dark Tower Palaver.
Travis says, I want to do a Craven versus Carpenter debate. I'm Team Carpenter, and my buddy is Team Craven, so it'd be a great discussion. Reminds me of a certain flag debate. Yeah, and I haven't forgotten.
Oh, no, we have not forgotten the flag debate.
About that. I do have that on my list of things for sure, but that's one that we definitely want to make sure we're like prepped for and stuff, and not just going into it willy-nilly.
So, speaking of the flag debate, a certain someone here just finished his 5th or 6th time through the Dark Tower.
Oh yeah,
I did.
Anything? Any new enlightenments? Anything kind of like new thoughts? I guess.
I text you about this because this is, and then you told me to save it for the show because it's a perfect conversation to have. Every time I read the Dark Tower series, or like I say read, but I listen to it on Audible.
Yeah,
and I tell you, each time I flip flop back and forth. Is Roland going to be redeemed? Does he have a chance, or is he just completely fucking damned?
Yeah.
And this time flipped me to I'm 1000% convinced he'll never break the cycle. There's nothing he can do to break the cycle.
Oh, nihilistic Peter.
There's a couple phrases, and I completely forgot to bring my Dark Tower book, book 7, I mean, to read to you, because there's a couple. The voice that speaks to him in the top of the tower tells him that he's doomed forever, like straight up. One line is straight up, you're doomed to do this forever, so stop whining, or something like that. Straight up tells him you are 1000% like doomed.
Yeah, but is that
so? It's just like, oh damn.
Is that just part of like what the tower is and what it's doing to him? Is it speaking the truth, or is it trying to fuck with him? I guess would be the question I would bring up. Like, it's one of those things, what do you call it? Like an unreliable narrator, like Fight Club type movie, like where you have stuff that's not really like. Is that a reliable? The
one thing
voice,
also there that
hashtag Peter is a pessimist.
I am in some things. So one other thing that I really noticed, and I want you to listen to this next time you go through the Dark Tower series.
Yeah.
When you get to book 7 and you get into the tower, Flag's dead, right?
At that point, yeah, he's dead. Yeah.
He's full on dead. Like eaten dead, right?
Yeah.
I may be crazy, and you guys can fact check this too and post on Facebook and let me know. I swear to God, they do the Flag voice for the voice of the tower.
Now, is that the narrator doing it?
On purpose.
Yeah, but I'm saying, is it in the text?
His Flag voice is very distinct, and so just part of me is just wondering.
Which you're talking George Guidall, obviously.
Yeah, George Guidall.
But what I'm saying is it in the text, though? Because he could be taking liberties.
And I know. And that's where I want some fact check. That's where I'm saying you need to remember that next time you go through it, and you guys too, the fans, let me know. Listen really close to that voice that talks to Roland in the tower. I almost expected to titter.
I think I recall that from what you're saying, but I think it is one of those things that it really comes down to, though. Is it just the narrator doing his thing, or is it like in the text where it's like in the voice of Flag type? You know what I mean?
It doesn't say it in the voice of Flag. It never says that.
Yeah, in the text.
I will give you that 1000%. I know that it does not say that, but I found it interesting that the narrator chose a voice that is not normal and is a very distinct character in this series to go with. So
whether he picked it or whether the director of the production picked it, but yeah, it was a decision made. But what it comes down to, though, is it's like an adaptation. Though that doesn't mean that that doesn't make it true.
I just want some insight. So don't shoot me down before you hear it, sir. I'm just saying.
No, I think I know what you're talking about, because I do recall that at some point.
Because if Flag is the one who controls that.
I like what Travis is saying here. Flag is Gan? Yes. Yes, he is.
Or he's the other one?
Well, I mean.
Uh-huh.
No, I think it's better just to think of him as the all-powerful Flag. That's a comforting thought.
Or maybe Flag isn't Flag, and we're being completely having the wool covering our eyes. You know, I don't know. I need you to read it again sometime.
Yeah.
And when you do, we need to talk about it. Because I'm seriously convinced that Roland's never going to be redeemed. Horn or no horn.
Yeah. So I do. I mean, I don't necessarily. I think I've evolved over time with my interpretation of like the ending, but it generally has been linear, going in one direction, more and more towards the idea of like being more solidified in the fact that he will be redeemed. So I've not really had that where I'm flip flopping like in my mind like you have. But for me, it's always just been one of those things where it's just like more and more it solidifies my view that in my mind. Not again. I think it's open ended. I think
Travis has a very good point. That's an awesome point, Travis. I like that.
What?
Travis said, the greatest trick the devil ever played is making you think he isn't real. And I think the original quote is making think the world isn't real.
Yeah.
But he also addemmed it and said, or isn't Gan.
Interesting.
It's very interesting to think about that, because if Flag is Flag.
Now here's the other question. Could it be embodying the voices that are in his head, which one of those has been Flag.
It's entirely possible. It is entirely possible to use that voice.
Yeah, what his father, Court, and Flag are the ones primarily in his head throughout the series.
Van A also talks to him, and I think he hears Eddie in the tower as well.
I thought he remembered Van A, what Van A had said, but I don't think you really get like the almost disembodied voice in his head of Van A. I thought that was just the couple characters, and Flag obviously because that he's tormenting him after in the beginning of the second book, and then throughout the series it's a lot less often, but every so often there's just that small like thing. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe it's Flag that has him trapped, repeating the cycle because he has him repeating every single time because he has to stop him. And so he gets close to the top of the tower and then, creates a door and sends him back to the Mohaine Desert and sends him back in time.
Yeah.
Speaking of linear and time travel, I have a question. And I want fan input and I want Tad's knowledge on this because this baffled me this time through. I caught it every time I read before that in the Keystone world and in the Dark Tower world, time is linear, you can't go back, you can't change anything.
Yeah.
Does that include when Roland gets reset?
No, because I think
those worlds get reset then?
Yeah, they do. Because I think it's one of those. Because I believe what happens at the top of the tower, whether you call it good or ill, I think it's divine intervention. Like thinking like the fact that the horn comes into existence. So like there's changes happening. Like I feel like that's like an act of God that's happening to move him back. So I feel like it does reset the story and like puts the Rose back in danger and stuff, because it's not like, I guess I see it as like a paradigm of like power and like, okay, these doors and these like balls and stuff like that do all this like mystical shit, right? I feel like that's like stuff like if you're talking a scale of 1 to 100 is like down in like the tops 25. Like if you're talking like Black 13, it's probably like 25 out of 100 in terms of power scales. And then you start getting up into things like, and I think the tower is far more on the higher end of like in the 90s and stuff with like maybe Gan being 100.
The beams, the prim, the tower.
All that stuff,
that stuff's the higher end
like
of magic.
Yeah, like cosmic stuff. So it's like, yes, when they're talking, because they only understand in their lower levels of magic and sorcery and stuff that is real to them throughout the story, that you can't go back and reset this shit.
No, that's Magnus just touched on my point. It has to, right? But that's my point. What if it doesn't? What if every time Roland's reset, all of a sudden the Rose is still fine? The corporation exists to protect it, but the next time Roland goes to talk to them, it's not 1999, it's 2018. Or it's 2030 or something like that. That time is continuously going forward, and that's how we end up with North Central Positronics having the ability to make robots. Is that we eventually get Roland to the point where he is going to get redeemed, but it's so far into the future in the Keystone world, in the Dark Tower world, that we have the ability to make robots, monorails that travel faster than the speed of sound. All that kind of technology is able to exist at that point. That keeps what King wrote, that you can't go back in time in those worlds, which is where we see you have to pull Jake and Eddie and Susanna from different worlds every time. So in one world, we may have an Eddie who's not a junkie. We may pull the brothers that's at the end of book 7.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. We know those aren't from Keystone. Susanna says that when she goes over. She knows that's not Keystone Earth.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder, that's where it clicked for me, is that I've always assumed that it resets those worlds too. But I mean, the number of times that King makes a point that Keystone world and the Dark Tower world, where the Dark Tower is physically located, you cannot go back in time there. Period. And so that just makes me wonder, is that why we have robots and stuff like that? Is because those worlds are continuously moving forward. And even though Roland's being sent back, the next time he opens the door to get Eddie, it's not going to be 1987. It's going to be 2030. And there's an Eddie that exists at that when, in that where, in that world.
No, I mean, I guess just to me, like, I would just wonder then what's the dangers and stuff that he's facing, like if the tower's not in danger, like say once the breakers and stuff, like, right, because if that's linear as well, so like it just seems to me it'd probably get reset in my mind. And I think that, I mean, if we want to take a step for a second out of like the in-universe stuff a little bit, I would say that the reason that that's obviously put in is to make sure the tension's there, right? Like because
and also the finality of where Jake and Eddie die.
Yeah,
is that it's in the two worlds that you can't go back and undo it.
Yeah, because I mean, and Star Trek does this kind of shit too, where like at some point they have to try to make up something that makes sure that like tension's there, so they have to make up these rules that like suddenly like time travel can't be used. Or I know Doctor Who does that. I think they have like I'm not a Doctor Who fan, but I do believe from what I've understand from people I've talked to, they make things that are like immutable, like historic things. Like you can't go back and kill Hitler. You can't go back. Like, there's certain things you can't do as like a person that jumps through time and stuff. And so that's their way of like of addressing it. And I feel like with King, like he's trying to tell a story that has to have tension, so he has to remove what he's given those characters of like, oh, they have this ability to jump around time and space and shit, so he has to tie their hands a little bit, because otherwise we as readers are going to be like, oh well, cool, you failed. Well, it's just like a video game where you could do your own saves anytime you want, and then you get close to a boss and you save, because then if you lose you just go back to the save point and then keep going until you win. Or
exactly.
So that's out of universe, obviously. So in universe, I mean, like I said, I've always just interpreted it as that what's happening when he gets cycled back is like, call it like a 95 out of 100 for magic level. And I feel like Gan is the only one that's at that 100% level. And Gan's the one that intercedes to give him the horn because of his progress. So I've always interpreted it as like the linear thing kind of gets, in my mind, this is how I've always interpreted it. Because I do think about things like this as a kid growing up on sci-fi and stuff. Like, this is shit in my mind that has to be reconciled. And that's how I've always interpreted it, is that you're just dealing with a larger magic than.
And see, that's one of the things, like what Magnus said, is my wife and I always wondered how stable are the characters, like the quartet is different people each time. Shrugs, I don't like the idea, but maybe. But what I'm saying is that
and we've talked about that.
It's still going to be Eddie. It's still going to be Jake. There's going to be different character traits to them, but it's still at the core, it's the same person.
Just like Cuthbert and Eddie are the same. Like, not that it has to be an Eddie Dean.
They're twins.
Yeah, not that it has to be Eddie Dean, but the general sense of like the way those two are similar. He's probably always, well, unless you say that, is Cuthbert and Alana always the same too? I guess you'd have to ask that.
Well, no, because they're
before the loop.
Before the loop. So they're dead. They're not coming back. The loop always goes back to the Mohaine Desert, as far as we know.
Yeah.
I mean, he says it in the book when it opens. He realizes the truth and that he's been there several times. Before, he never gives a definite number and everything.
Yeah.
And my point is that if that Eddie died and that Jake died, there's no resurrecting that. And that's what King kind of makes the point, like you're talking about, of making it, there needs to be a finality.
Yeah.
And so that just makes me wonder if we look at it in that sense, if Gan is about the tower, if the tower falls, Gan ceases to exist, dies, / dies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why would an entity that powerful put itself in danger by sending Roland back in time to put itself in danger again?
I just agree with you a second ago, but I was more just like, because like honestly I've never interpreted that Gan would necessarily be killed. I feel it's just one of those things that existence ceases, but I think isn't Gan beyond that? Like if you apply a lot of different religions interpret God in our world. If you apply those things to Gan, he or it is outside of time and space. And all those things are things that he or it has created. So if all that shit ceases to exist,
it just goes back to the Prim.
Yeah,
he would still exist in the Prim.
Yeah,
but with the monsters and stuff like that he's raised himself up out of.
Yeah, so I think it would come down to like why he would want to see it prevail. Why would he give him the horn type thing? Would come down to the thing of like he has some interest, whether it's like a benevolent, loving thing as most religions.
See, and that just proves that Flag can't be Gan then. So
well, for him it'd probably just be like the chaos of like roll the dice each time and see what happens, and just watch the world burn type thing.
Well, it also goes back to like the quote from Susanna's dad when. Book 5 or book 3, I can't remember which one it is. She brings up the quote, and I talked to you about this. I don't know if it was on the air on the podcast. It was I think I texted you about it. It was a very real thunderbolt for me this time reading through, where he says, she says, "Do you think God cares about each and every one of us?" And he goes, "I think God stopped caring about all of us when we killed his son."
Yeah,
that kind of it goes back. I mean, it's Christianity, Jesus Christ and everything like that. But I don't know why, but I kind of like the idea that Gan is just like, man, fuck all this. Like, fuck you all kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I've always kind of, ever since I heard that, I've always kind of liked that idea for a story that, you know, the benevolent being who raised the world, and I'm talking strictly Dark Tower here, raised the world, planted the Dark Tower, created the beams, raised us from the prim, and created life in this existence, all the different levels of the tower and everything like that. And then he's got so fed up with our shit that he's just like, peace. Which is what opened the door for terrible people like the Crimson King and Flag to try and bring the Dark Tower down, to bring us back into the darkness of the prim. And then I like your idea that Gan's one gambit now, because he has said peace, and so basically he's removed himself, is to pick a champion, Roland, and be like, get the shit right. And then he just keeps fucking it up.
Yeah. But again, the way I interpret the ending is that with this cycle that we're watching, Roland is as close to getting it right as he's ever been. And I feel like because like the transformation of the character from book 1 and book 4 through the end of the series is astronomical.
Yeah.
And I feel that's why there's the divine intervention of give him the horn, because now he potentially, it signifies that there's a difference in this man from the beginning. Now you've gone and changed outside of the loop and went, okay, this man now cared enough to take that couple seconds to pick that horn up, because he mentions like, why didn't I just spend those couple seconds to pick it up, and so so there's some, I don't know, that's a pretty weighty conversation for sure. And I guess it's because you read it. I was about to say, how the hell did we slip into this?
Yeah, it's because it popped into my head when I was going through book 7.
Yeah.
So
that's an interesting one for sure. I don't know. Yeah, the reason that I'm not super concerned about, like, for my own like mind of like things like why is there robots and like more advanced technology, the reason is because like I always look at it as like what we got to remember is that like generally speaking, I guess some of it was more solidified in the movie, so whether you want to count that or not, but Midworld's not Earth. It's not a future version of Earth. It's the future version of a very similar thing to Earth.
Isn't it?
What?
Isn't it though? It's just another level of the tower. I mean, all of those ones are Earth.
Yeah, but like the planetary differences in the movie and stuff, which, and
what, desert? Forest?
No.
You don't see anything...
the planets, when he looks up and he sees the multiple planets. And I've always kind of interpreted that, like, I bounce back and forth reading it originally and stuff. Like, are we talking about post-apocalyptic Earth? Like, are we talking something 3,000 years from now, or are we talking something completely different? And I think when you start getting it, so like, I guess I've always just settled on the fact of, okay, we're talking about something different. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have access to our world, but the world that they're from is one that does have things like robots, living trains, like things. So I guess that's, for me, that's why I've never really had the issues of like, why does this shit exist? Because I've always just went, oh, well, because Midworld is a different world with a different evolution that allowed them to have all these things, and then see the whole thing, the bottom fall out of all of it, and create the fact that it's a post-apocalyptic world where shit doesn't work anymore for the most part.
Magnus, no, Lud is not New York in the future. They make it perfectly clear in the book that the bridge looks like the George Washington Bridge, but it is in fact a little bit different.
But it's a twinner city, basically.
It's a twinner, exactly. That's what you got to remember, is that it is not New York. It scares the hell out of Eddie and Susanna and Jake because it looks like New York, but it's very different than New York in a lot of different ways. For one, the river that they cross is hundreds of feet below them and still deep. The Send River?
I don't know.
I think it's the Send. The Send River. I want to say it's the Y, but I'm reading Wind Through the Keyhole, and I just crossed that to get to the town before the Stark blast. But I think it's the Send River. Yeah, it's the Send River. And it's hundreds of feet below, and that's not how the George Washington Bridge is. So you just got to remember that Lud is not a futuristic New York.
And see, that's the thing, is like early on when I read it, I thought the same thing. I'm okay, so this is just New York. So,
exactly.
Okay, so this is post-apocalyptic.
Right,
you know
exactly.
What I mean? And things like the Beatles. I mean, there's plenty of things. And what it is,
the gas companies are a huge one.
Yeah, Citgo. And so it's one of those things that, like, there's those connections that are similar. Like, it's like the Venn diagram where things overlap. The things that overlap in Midworld, early on in my reading, made me think that, okay, so this is a post-apocalyptic Earth. Cool. This is, we're dealing with, like, Mad Max type stuff.
Because Roland makes a perfectly valid point that he knows nothing about Nazis. He's never seen the Nazi symbol before. He's never heard of them before.
Yeah.
They make that perfectly clear when they find Quick's plane.
Yeah.
So,
which is something that crossed through
it came from our world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's but that is something I've done too. It's kind of funny because it's one of those things like there's two new basic things that I do. I tend to like try to connect things like okay, blood, okay, cool, it's New York. And then the other one for me is generally speaking, if as you would call them, a villain shows up, I always assume they're Flag until they're proven that they're not. I just do. Yeah, especially if they have an R or an F or both, I just one of those like, yeah, it's Flag, and then like eventually it reveals it's not, like, oh, okay, it wasn't. But it's just like, because he's everywhere, for God's sake. So it's just like those are like two like natural things I have when I'm dealing with King stuff, is both of those. But yeah, that is definitely an interesting conversation. And yet, like I said, I wouldn't say that like, again, my interpretation or your interpretation is right. I feel like there's always
no, I think that's one of the glorious things about the ending of the series is that there is the ability to interpret it. And that's one of the reasons why we love this series so much, is because we're able to have conversations, we're able to debate, the Flag and Roland, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. There is, and I'll this will be the first time I go publicly on record to say this, all right? I've never even said this to Tad. There's absolutely points that Tad's going to make in our debate that points that Flag is the good guy. He's absolutely wrong, but there are valid points that he can make towards that.
I would say,
and I'm not saying in the slightest. And there are many, many points that you can point that Roland Deschain is not a good guy.
Yeah.
Period.
But again, that again, what makes this series so great is that ambiguity.
Exactly.
It's not just white hats and black hats. And like, to me, that's a thing that makes this series endearing, and that's a thing that is the reason we're doing this podcast. If it was just white hats and black hats and it was just your average, chalk fantasy thing, I wouldn't be as interested in it, like, long term. I may enjoy it one time, but I don't think I would read it multiple times. I don't think I would be doing a podcast about it. Like, that's like the more ambiguity of like things like good versus evil, like, right. Like, I don't know, like, I love The Stand, and The Stand's a lot more clear cut in terms of like there's two very distinct sides. You don't see like Mother Abigail fucking like,
massacring people.
Yeah, torture, like torching towns and stuff like that.
Crucifying people.
So it's like that one's a little bit more white hats, black hats, but I feel like it's not trying to be the larger thing that Dark Tower is. I feel like when you're in something like Dark Tower that's so much larger, the ambiguity helps it. Whereas something like The Stand, I feel like you probably want it to be a little bit more cut and dry, because the message there is definitely it's
definitely good versus evil.
Yeah.
White hats versus black hats, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think that it's needed for that story. The Dark Tower, though,
it benefits from the ambiguity.
It absolutely
really does. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what's great about it.
But please, when you start the Dark Tower series again, let me know. I'm going to set a reminder that when you do tell me that you're starting it, I'm going to set a reminder like a month out or something like that, to be like, okay, when he gets to book 7, he has got to listen to that part when Roland makes a realization at the top in that room.
Yeah.
To listen to the voice and just tell me if you hear Flag.
No, I do. I know what you're talking about, because I've had the thought before and thought it through my head, where it's just like, and that's why I had the answer for you even now, where I'm just like, I think it might just be the narrator making a choice, because I don't think it really says it in this text where it's like, in the voice of Flag, the voice said this, like, so King himself didn't, because I guess that's the thing is like, again, like, I guess like if you're going to go like levels of canon, the ultimate canon is the written book, right?
Right.
And then from there, if there's differences in the audio by things like voice inclinations and stuff, unless it says it in the text, like, Eddie screamed, if the narrator has a louder voice, like, okay, that's still canon because it's in the text. But if it just says Eddie said and the narrator makes him scream, I don't interpret that as Eddie screaming in the base canon.
Gotcha.
And I know that's all kind of like gets really nitty gritty, but like that's the way I interpret it. And then like when you get into things like the comic books, that's why I still hold that I think that Farson is Flag. I know there's a lot of people that push back on me about that, and they usually point the comic books is what really differentiates them. But I feel like there's things in there that show they're the same, including the introductions by King where he says that one of the names of Flag is Farson. So, and then like the ultimate one I keep bringing up is from book 7 when the guy says, your mom sucked John Farson's cock. Well, Roland's mom was not sleeping with John Farson. She was sleeping with Flag. So Flag is Farson. Like, that's always been my silver bullet to the argument. But I know other people disagree with that, and that's fine, because that there are probably people that have got the comic books a lot more than I have ever have, and so they've allowed that to kind of define their. And there is some ambiguity. I feel like King kind of moves things around to where
let's clarify one thing for me. Did King write the stories for the comic books?
No.
Then it goes back to your original statement.
Exactly. Levels of canon.
The levels of canon.
The comic books are not.
The first one has to be the books.
Yes.
And if that's what the guy said, and you're absolutely right, the guy did say that. I remember the part you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the guys that are chasing Jake under the Dixie Pig.
Yeah.
You know, he said he absolutely does.
Yeah, so that's like always been like the one for me that once I read that and it fucking dawned on me, like, holy shit, like this is the like the proof, because like there are people who would say that like the intros by King aren't considered canon because they're not really part of the story. It's an intro, right? Like it's King talking to you as a like, so it's like if I wrote a book and then I came to you and said, hey Peter, so let me tell you about this, and then I told you stuff, that doesn't make it canon. All I'm doing is, you know, telling you something before I hand you the book. So that's always been an argument I've seen online with people where they're like, well, the argument section isn't canon. It isn't until the book starts that it's canon. So that's why once that I realized that whole exchange there, that's why that was always kind of a big moment for me. And I think it happened while we were recording the show early on when I made that realization and I brought it to the show. But again, everyone has different interpretations of it. I'm not saying I'm right. And I always like to say that because if people are newer, I don't want you to think that like you have to fall in line with the way we interpret things. I mean, like Peter just mentioned, he's changed how he interprets the ending based on this reading, or not necessarily the ending, but Roland's fate, I guess, which is again #Peter the pessimist, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm always convinced that my guys aren't going to win, even though they're the good guys.
Yeah, I think that.
And fear not, Travis. The debate's not lost.
Oh no! It's just one of those things. I really want to make sure that it's carved out and has adequate prep time and that kind of stuff. I don't want to just throw it out there willy nilly and have it be some half-assed thing. It's definitely still on my list of things for sure. So yeah, let's jump over to the news, unless you have more that you wanted to talk about.
No, that was it for that.
I mean,
any fans out there reading Book 7, any fans out there listening to Book 7, give us a shout about that. I just want some, especially the listening for the Kindle, the Audible version. Sorry, I'm looking at the Kindle version right now for the Dark Tower 7. There's definitely some ambiguity there for me.
Yeah. And it is one of those things that, like, it could be either the narrator and or the director that was directing the production of the audiobook could have just made that decision because maybe that's how they read it. Maybe in their head it was Flag's voice. And honestly, that's happened to me when I was reading just the text. There's been times that, like, a certain person's voice is in my head for a certain, area of text when it really isn't. I want to say, honestly, when I read it originally, I think that Andy the robot was very much Blaine's voice in my head when I was reading them.
Yeah.
Like from the page type thing. I mean, obviously not there's some massive connection between them, but maybe it was just one of those where it's just like there's some North Central Positronics thing that kind of keeps some similar whatever. I don't know. Like maybe it's the same dude doing the voice for all of them, but whatever. All right. So yeah, we'll get over to the news now. There's a couple cool things to talk about. The way we're going here, already an hour in just on that great conversation, I'm guessing we're probably not going to get to any emails, but there's still a lot of cool things to talk about for news here. And I think this is this first one here is a cool article that kind of goes towards what we've talked about a tiny bit and some excitement that we've had. And the title is, I guess we can. Oh, you know what? I am going to have to just leave the round table thing up on the screen because I forgot. I knew I was forgetting something today on my prep. I forgot to change the slideshow to have the new articles. I knew I forgot something today.
You'll fix that.
Yeah, there was like one of those like right before you got here. It's like, God, it feels like I'm forgetting something, but like I've even like I don't know. Yeah, so we'll have to just roll with it and then go to the show notes, darktowerpalaver.com to get all the details for what we're talking about here.
It's where you go to read the full articles anyways, guys. So.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess if you're watching on YouTube, you don't have it on the screen to show you what I'm talking about. But I'll tell you right up front, the title of the article is The Generation That Grew Up on Stephen King is Taking Him Back. And it's written by Randall Colburn from The Outline, and it was from July 18th, 2018. This, let's see. So Randall starts off here. And he says, he carved out a gilded throne for himself, talking about Stephen King, carved out a gilded throne for himself in the horror zeitgeist, but despite his ubiquity, his relevance ebbs and flows, his visibility disappearing for years on end before his shadow reappears longer and darker than ever before. And I hadn't really thought about that. We talk about these like King renaissances, like the Renaissance of King, the golden ages of King.
The golden and silver age, yeah.
But I've never thought about it that way, to where like he does ebb and flow. Like Stephen King 10 years ago doesn't have the same kind of gravitas. Like, he was writing books and stuff, obviously, but Hollywood wasn't taking him serious. That would have been before the Under the Dome adaptation 10 years ago. Like, that was before that. That was before.
It was after The Mist, though.
Yeah, The Mist is 2020 or
2006.
No, 07. So there was a little bit there, yeah, but definitely not like we're seeing now. Where, God, I need a fucking checklist to remind me of all the things that are going on right now. And there's been more added since we recorded last. Like, and so we're definitely in a golden age, but I've never really thought about it in that way of like ebbing and flowing. And then this author puts it in a great way. He says, in that regards, he's not that unlike Pennywise, the ancient cackling clown at the center of It, though without the literal child murder. Yeah, I mean, that's the one difference. But yeah, it's interesting that King does ebb and flow. He, sometimes is big. And I wonder, like, for not to be depressing, but is this boom the last one that Stephen King's going to see in his lifetime? Because a lot of times these are like decade or more that go between these booms. I mean, the last big boom, honestly, was
the 80s,
late 80s, early 90s. Like that chunk between 85 and like 95. Like that was the last one. Like that's 20 years ago. So if it's 20 years till the next one, I mean, hopefully he's still around and hopefully he's still writing too. But it's not guaranteed at this point. So.
And hopefully he hears the call of the tower again.
Yeah, no kidding.
3 or 4 more times.
Yeah, that's at least though, unlike some fans of some certain books of certain authors, at least we have our series completed.
Oh, shots fired.
I'm just saying, can you imagine if we were in that spot where we're waiting and just like, God, there's one last book, like imagine being at the spot where like book 6 ended and book 7 hadn't been out yet, and we're sitting here 12 some odd years later and just no sign of it coming. King's not talking about it. Like, can you imagine, man? That would be like,
that's why I'm not reading the Game of Thrones books yet.
Yeah, exactly. I've made a commitment to myself. I'm not going to read them till they're all done. And if they don't get done, I won't read them. The show will be it for me. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care how good they are as books. I'm not going to dive into a series that is incomplete.
Yeah, same here.
Not doing it. That's the reason, actually, a lot of times I don't commit to TV shows. You know that about me. There's times I wait a couple years for a TV show before, even if I'm interested in it, because I'm like, I'm not going to get into it, get invested, and have it be canceled after a year. I'm just not. Like Hannibal.
Trust me, it really sucks.
Hannibal, I'm a huge fan of that show, but like I didn't watch it until the third season started, and then after I got into it, it got canceled. But like, at least I got 3 years of it.
It got picked back up.
No.
It didn't?
No. There's been some rumblings, but nothing official.
That sucks.
But yeah, no. So it's like one of those. Like I usually wait a couple years for a show, just because I can't handle that kind of like heartbreak. I guess it's happened to me too many times.
I still haven't watched Hannibal.
Yeah, it's a good one. You should. I was thinking about rewatching it at some point soon. Then the article goes on and says, after years of relative hibernation, we're in the midst of the author's biggest renaissance yet. And what do you think of that claim? Before I even go on any further,
I'd agree.
Do you think this
because
beats
not only is it books, but it's film and television as well. We're getting classic stuff.
Yeah,
in 3 different forms of media, whereas his 85 to 95 one,
it was TV and movies.
It was TV and movies, but we didn't get. Did we get any classic books during that time? He was more focused on the Hollywood aspect.
I'm trying to remember what came. I mean, you would have had. Book 2 came out in that period, 87. So you had that. I want to say, didn't Book 3 come out in the early 90s too? I'm blanking.
Yeah, they weren't that far apart.
So those would have been in there, but like,
we don't count the Dark Tower. I mean, the Dark Tower is always separate
because it's a larger thing to where like you can't really call those classics in them of themselves. They're classics because they're part of the Dark Tower series.
Yeah, because like when he started doing like the big Hollywood push and everything like that, he kind of stopped writing a little bit, didn't he?
No, he didn't stop writing. I think he probably wrote less. Let me pull up my checklist here.
Yeah, because then after the Hollywood fame and everything like that stopped, he went back to writing more.
Let's see. So we'll go 85. Skeleton Crew. So it came out in 86, which is a big. No. Yeah, I'd have to refute you because you got it 86, and then 87 you got Misery. Tommyknockers, whether you call that a classic or not, it's definitely one that has some popularity.
It's okay.
And I'm not jumping over. There's some I'm jumping over, not necessarily because they're bad, but just because like I don't know if they fit into like a classic. Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne came out in that time period. Insomnia, 94. And then Green Mile is just outside of that. So Definitely not in the realm of like the early stuff and what we've had recently with things like 11/22/63 probably being the crown jewel,
the Mercedes trilogy.
The Mr. Mercedes stuff is really good too.
Doctor Sleep.
He was writing, but maybe the stuff wasn't as long-standingly classic as things from like the earlier period.
And that's what I was meaning is that we had look at that early part there with It and Misery and even to an extent Tommyknockers, and then we start to dip and we even see a dive in numbers there versus what he's putting out now. We were talking about it a couple months ago. I mean, he's putting out 2 books a year?
A couple books a year, yeah.
Which is just insane to see.
A couple of years ago, he had 3 books in a year.
Yeah,
so.
we were blown away by that, and and this year we've had The Outsider and
the one with Owen, right? Sleeping Beauties, wasn't that this year?
Was that this year? I missed that one.
Yeah, I believe that was this year.
I think you were telling me about it. Is that the one did you read that one, or was it one of our fans?
Somebody did we read that email? There's an email, whether it's in the queue or whether we've already read it, that mentioned that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. It was last episode. Because I'm blanking on who it was, but somebody said rather than doing because all the top 4 and 5s are always generally the same books. He said he was going to rank the last few that he had read.
Oh yeah,
Sleeping Beauties was one of them.
Yeah.
So we did bring that up, but I'm interested in going. I need to go through and read some of those. The other thing, I think the only thing that we definitely need to do is our Unfound Door for Outsider. Got to do that at some point for sure.
We do.
We've let that slip a little bit. But then it goes on here and says, credit its origins with the commercial success of CBS's Under the Dome, the critical acclaim of Hulu's 11/22/63, or the clear homage emanating from Netflix's Stranger Things. But it was last year's seismic It that truly catapulted King back into the A-list. And I think that is definitely something, because I even remember when Stranger Things came out, I remember being like, yeah, this is all Stephen King. And I think that was about the same time that there's even podcast episodes that we did here where I was like pulling my hair out because I'm like, come on, Warner Brothers, greenlight it. It's going to be a fucking hit. Because they were like reducing the budgets. They were like, weren't going to guarantee a second movie.
Didn't they have a director walk?
Cary Fukunaga. Yeah, the guy that did True Detective season 1. So there was like all this stuff where I'm just like, dude, Warner Brothers, you've got a fucking $100 million movie. Just release the damn thing. Give it a green light and let this fucking movie get made because it's going to be a hit.
And it was.
And it ended up being a huge hit because it's just one of those like. Because they had committed that they wanted to do R-rated, and I was like, okay, so you're going to do R-rated.
You've already got the old fans there.
Yeah.
The fans of the book are going to go see it just based off the fact that it's R-rated and it's not made for TV.
Yeah.
Because that was the biggest complaint about the first one.
Yeah.
Oh, it was kind of scary, but it was made for TV. I mean, how much can you do?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those, like, I remember that around that era, like Stranger Things, like, so like there was like a bubbling interest with King, but like it's one of those, like, it didn't have the same, like right now it just feels like every week I'm getting updates where it's like, oh, new Stephen King project, greenlit and stuff, and it's just it's almost every week. So and then I think this article actually gets into that a little bit. And it says currently the flick, and we're talking about it still, the flick's worldwide gross resides at more than $700 million on a $35 million budget.
Good Lord.
With both the critics and audience Rotten Tomatoes scores hovering around 85%.
Yeah.
So that's definitely says a lot about the movie for sure. And I honestly think it not only has helped Stephen King's gravitas, but I really feel that it's helping Hollywood be okay with greenlighting rated R movies now.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot.
Deadpool, Logan, it started showing that even stuff that was supposed to originally be comic book and kid friendly and everything like that.
Yeah.
There's adult things there that need to be rated R that people will still go see.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole taboo that if you make a rated R movie, you're not going to make as much as if you made a PG-13. If Hollywood doesn't realize that's dead, they need to really soon.
The whole PG-13 thing?
Yeah.
It doesn't. There's actually, I've been racking my brain the last couple seconds trying to think what it was. I just saw a headline the last couple days where there's a movie, and it's one that should be rated R that's going to be getting a PG-13 rating. And I forget what it is, but it's just happened.
It's not Halloween, is it?
No.
Oh, thank God.
No. I'd be up in arms. I'd be with a pitchfork outside of the studio.
Why a pitchfork? Why not a protest sign?
Because a pitchfork's more menacing.
All right.
You know, pitchfork and torches, like the mobs in like the classic
Monster
Simpsons
flicks?
episodes or monster flicks or whatever it might be. Yeah,
You're not going after Frankenstein's monster, sir.
it's-
You're going to protest.
it's stereotypical stuff, you know. And let's see, is it
Agamor.
Agamorphy? It says if only Dark Tower had racked those numbers. Sigh. Yeah, indeed.
Well, let's see. It was ballsy enough to go with an R-rated.
Yeah.
It was ballsy
But-
enough to go with.
The other thing, it had a built-in audience with like the nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
You know, that's what really helped them a lot. Is it's like
Right,
literally
but-
the same year that Beauty and the Beast came out, which also did massive money that year.
Yes, it did.
The It miniseries came out, dude. There's been generations of children that grew up watching that and being terrified of clowns because of that show.
Mm-hmm.
Like they look fondly back on that. So the first thing they're going to want to do when that movie gets announced, like remember the YouTube hits for the trailer.
Oh yeah,
You know,
astronomical.
it was the biggest and fastest growing video of its time, and it's just one of the things that comes from that nostalgia and stuff. So it's like one of those like Dark Tower doesn't have that. It doesn't have that built in. It doesn't have
not
the
nearly,
iconic
not
nature.
nearly the size that it has. No.
No, it doesn't. So, and you know, I even remember whether it was on the episode or whether it was just me and you in person when that happened. I'm like, watch, they're gonna finally greenlight the freaking sequel because it hadn't been greenlit yet, and they still didn't. It wasn't until the opening weekend that they greenlit the freaking sequel to it. As
Yeah.
ridiculous as that sounds, that shows you how freaking crazy these studios are.
You got to read Cody's question there for you.
Pitchfork and a hockey mask. Yeah, there we go. Hey, and thank you for getting the reference right. Not saying chainsaw and a hockey mask. That's like the biggest like cultural faux pas. Is like every haunted house you go to, like, you know, around Halloween. We have them here in Utah. I assume around the country has them too.
Yeah.
Where you go to get all scared and stuff. Every one of them ends with a guy with a chainsaw and a hockey mask. And I'm like, Jason never used a chainsaw. Put a Leatherface mask on. Get it right. Come on here.
I've been to a haunted house that had a Leatherface guy.
There was one I went to one time, and it was around 2003 when that remake came out, and I'm guessing that's the reason they did Leatherface, because then it went back to like a few years later. It's back to hockey masks. It's like, come on, guys. So thank you for getting it right. Jason does indeed use a pitchfork at one point.
2 points for Cody.
Yes, indeed.
You've remembered the face of your father, and the face of your din,
and the face of John Carpenter.
Yes,
because master of horror, right? So then it goes on here. It says,
Cody asked, "Butcher knife?"
Yeah, now we're getting into Michael Myers territory.
Dun, 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 dun.
And then it says Michael Flanagan's Gerald's Game and Zach Hildich's 1922 adaptations followed shortly thereafter Pennywise's return, as did the announcement of Hulu King-inspired anthology series Castle Rock. As the latter's premiere date looms, the projects keep on coming, with its anticipated sequel now shooting. David E. Kelly's Mr. Mercedes TV adaptation returning in August, which, as a side step, they've released some pictures and stuff, and it looks like they're going to book 3 with that.
Yeah,
season 2.
that would make sense.
Yeah. So what are they just going to do? Book 2 as the third part of the thing, and like
There's only one thing that matters for
I know,
the
but
story for Hartsfeld.
Yeah, I guess to me it's like Indiana Jones. You have like the whole like Nazi biblical thing, but then you have like the one in the middle that's just kind of different. Like that's what I loved about Mr. Mercedes is it felt like it was taking that same thing. So it's kind of a
Yeah, but chronological Temple of Doom was the first one.
no, but it doesn't matter about that. It matters about how the movies are released. They didn't go, you know, we're going to do the freaking Holy Grail in the second movie and then do some crazy, you know, Hindu thing for the third movie. No, they break it up a little bit. So I always kind of wondered, like, maybe
Yeah, but there was nothing for the story for Mr. Mercedes. The show's called Mr. Mercedes.
Oh yeah,
This isn't going to be a new show called Finders Keepers, or whatever the second book is.
Well, no, because
the second book's called Finders Keepers
because of branding.
They own Mr. Mercedes rights. Why wouldn't they just name it Finders Keepers?
Well, no, because of branding. But,
because there's nothing in book 2 that's relevant to the story.
no, it's the characters though.
Not relevant to the story. Everything in book 2 could literally be
it's like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is the name of one of the books, right?
Right.
But the whole series is called Game of Thrones, despite the fact that only one season covers Game of Thrones.
Right, but we don't have a 4th book that takes place in America covering John Smith and Pocahontas. That's completely irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant.
And then Daenerys comes over and talks to them for one scene.
It doesn't.
It
has
but
the characters.
The story is Mr. Mercedes.
Like
it's
Holly.
the story of Mr. Mercedes.
Like Holly.
Right, and Holly's going to be in the third one.
Yeah,
she is in the third one. The second one has no bearing on the story.
I just feel like it's going to be anticlimactic. I feel like if they did it the order of the books, I feel like it pays off in a lot better way to kind of go out with the big grand finale with Brady in the third season. Whereas now, like, I feel like the second season or the third season, if it's taking the second book to adapt, I feel like it's going to be really lackluster in my opinion.
So what you're saying is they're taking season 1 is book 1, season 2 is book 3, and then season
3 would then go
season 2 is book 3, season 3 is going to be book 2.
Yeah.
Or why wouldn't they just leave book 2 out of it?
Because especially if it's a hit, they're going to want to do more. And what are you going to do? There's only one other option. So it just seems to me I think they'll do it.
Why don't they go down that road?
What?
The Outsider.
I don't know.
You're talking about the characters.
Because that's being adapted into its own show.
True.
That is. So, which I think this might be getting to. So Mr. Mercedes, and then Kevin Kolsch's and Dennis Widmeyer's Pet Cemetery slated for release early next year. And then it says also recently announced and is in the works, Mike Flanagan's Dr. Sleep and James Wan's The Tommyknockers. James Wan, by the way, outside of in the modern era, probably the best horror director in the modern era.
He did Saw,
The Conjuring.
He did The Conjuring. I didn't know that.
Both Conjurings he did. I think he did Insidious. I think it was Insidious that he did as well. He's a Dead Silence, a good one you loved quite a bit. I remember you liking that one back in the day.
That was a fun little movie.
That was James Wan as well. So yeah, I think modern day he's one of the better horror guys. So kind of cool to see him do Tommyknockers. Then it goes on and says King's enjoyed numerous renaissances since Carrie put him on the map in 1973. The era following Brian De Palma's 1976 film adaptation, the early 90s 1-2 punch of Misery's Oscar win and Tommy Lee Wallace's It miniseries, the 2-year spell at the turn of the millennium when he dropped the final 3 Dark Tower books, which is interesting. So that would be almost what came around the early 2000s? That would have been the Green Mile show. Didn't that? No, that wasn't early 2000s. That was late 90s.
Didn't Green Mile come out in like 1999?
I thought it was like more like 97, 98, but I could be wrong on that one.
I always forget.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one to put the Dark Tower books coming out in that early 2000s period as its own renaissance. But at the same time, I do think that it did. I think that's really when Dark Tower had its day in the sun a little bit, because that finally with those 3 books coming out so quickly, I think it was enough to get people hyped to get into it. And maybe it hooked in more readers than you would have had. I mean, that's kind of when I came into the series. So not that it was because of that, but yeah, it definitely helps.
James Wan did the first 2 Insidious, and he's also doing Aquaman.
Yeah, he's doing Aquaman too. Yeah, as well. Yeah,
and he's Tommyknockers. So yeah, that's what you said, right? It's Tommyknockers.
Yeah, he's doing Tommyknockers.
Yeah.
Yes, and then Mike Flanagan that did Gerald's Game is doing Dr. Sleep.
Gotcha.
Which is an interesting one. I think they've already done a few castings for that.
Ewan McGregor.
Yes, I think they've announced some other ones past that recently.
Oh, did they?
I can't remember who though. I don't know if like Abra got cast. Maybe, I'm not sure.
What is the movie where the deaf girl has her home invaded?
I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on that.
That was Cody in the chat.
Oh, Hush. I was going to say Quiet Place, but I don't think that's what he's looking for. Although it kind of fits, right?
Quiet Place? Cody says Hush.
Hush, okay. Or Quiet Place, that could fit that what he gave us there. Quiet Place can kind of fit into that a little bit. Then it goes on here and says his one, however, is marked different. I'm sorry, this one, it cut out a letter there for me. Sorry about that when I copied it. This one, however, is markedly different than those that came before, due not only to its scale and scope, but also because it's unfolding in a generation that's succeeded at both commodifying and intellectualizing nostalgia, which, again, big multiplier for it, I think, was the nostalgia factor. And it says the extended universes of Marvel and Star Wars are made by creators who grew up in the myth of these texts and subsequently worked to massage the industry into embracing a similar mode of cross-functional long-form storytelling, which, that's obviously happened. Then it goes on and says, despite the specter of Hollywood's soulless corporate suits, there's a devotion in that approach, a level of fidelity that can only emerge from lifelong fans. Now something similar is simmering amongst a generation of constant readers, and in parentheses it says King's pet name for his diehards, which is an interesting thing to, because like especially with like people that are really cynical about Hollywood and it's all dollars and cents and stuff. I've even seen people when they've kind of shit on things like superhero movies and stuff. And I want to say, regardless of more modern news, I remember at the time a couple years ago when people brought that up, and they, people kind of, I think the lady that plays Gamora kind of came out and said, like, you guys are full of shit. Like, if you want to tell me that, like, you care more about whatever you're doing than James Gunn cares about the Guardians of the Galaxy, or the Russo brothers care about the Avengers, like, and she kind of called them on that. She's like, these people care deeply about these things that they're doing. Like, this isn't just this soulless, churning out things. It's these people are huge fans of this stuff, and they care deeply about it. And it's interesting to point that out, that now that's happening with Stephen King. And it says when he hit the scene, King's work became a playground for genre's best and brightest. Brian De Palma, Stanley Kubrick, John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper, David Cronenberg, with their adaptations emerging as a populist art piece that, for the most part, transcended the horror roots. But as King's output increased, he released 14 novels and 2 collections in the 1980s, not to mention 3 additional books under his pseudonym Richard Bachman. So too did his currency in pop culture, which, we mentioned that already, that the 80s is a pretty big time for him in terms of like a lot of movies coming out. If you count the whole 80s, you're talking about things like The Shining, you're talking about pretty much all those golden age movies. It is like Christine, Carrie. Well, Carrie is the 70s actually, so not Carrie. Cujo, I think, was in the 80s, wasn't it?
Dude, I'm blown away by how fast Carrie came out after the novel.
3 years later,
like just so fast right after that for a first time novelist to have it adapted like that, and not only be adapted, but be adapted so well. Yeah,
indeed. It does kind of throw me off on Castle Rock to have Carrie looking so old and playing a completely different character. I'm like, hey,
I know, right?
I don't trust you. It's not quite the same level of distrust I have for what's her name from Misery, that actress, Kathy Bates. Yeah, don't trust her at all. But then it goes on here. It says his name became synonymous not only with storytelling but with digestible brand of horror. Subsequent adaptations spread over TV and film reflected that Children of the Corn, Silver Bullet, Graveyard Shift, The Manglers, The Running Man, The Lawnmower Man, all released between 1984 and 1995, bore little resemblance to their source material in story or tone, instead using King's central gimmick as a vessel for the modern genre trends. Which, they are basically just taking his stuff, doing whatever they wanted with it, and cashing in on the fact that, it's a Stephen King thing. And
Running Man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even they didn't do it for Insomnia later on. They didn't really tag King in that, did they? Because
that was not. We've talked about this before. Insomnia was not based off of the Stephen King novel.
Exactly, but they didn't even.
It's named Insomnia, but it has absolutely no bearing. Stephen King's name appears nowhere on that film.
Yeah, it does confuse people. Yeah, it doesn't. It isn't one of those like they didn't like try to like connect to it at all or whatever. But
no, because it really confused me there for a while when I first read Insomnia, and I was like, Insomnia, and I googled it, and it's like Insomnia the movie starring Al Pacino and Robin Williams, and I was like, wait, what? There's a movie about this? I was like, how the hell do those two fit into this movie? And I was like, okay, well, that one could be this one, and that one could be that one. And then I went and watched the trailer for it, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, indeed. And then it goes on here. It says, the message was clear. King's name was a selling point, but his writing wasn't. The cover mattered, not the pages. Now, what do you think of that? During this era, King's name was a selling point, but his writing wasn't. The cover mattered, and not the pages.
Yeah, because that's what we're going along. He's kind of referencing what we just said, is that it was his name being slapped onto a movie. It's, The Running Man, based on the novel by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And then it's like, someone's like, wow, that Arnold movie was really cool. I'm going to go check out the book. What the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly. I'd say, like, you almost had a reverse happen in the late 90s, though, or late 80s and early 90s with, like Stand By Me, Shawshank, like those movies I don't think really pushed heavily that they were Stephen King adaptations.
No, they had,
because most people don't know that they're Stephen King adaptations. Like how often are you able to surprise someone with like, oh yeah, Shawshank, that's a Stephen King
short story.
People are thrown off by it,
every time.
Stand By Me, nobody looks at that and goes, oh, Stephen King. Like Stephen King fans do, but non-Stephen King fans, not so much. Mm-hmm. So it's not that they were trying to hide it, but I don't think that it was as published. I don't think that, they probably had Stephen King on those posters as heavily as maybe some of these other ones that were just mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it says, there are bright spots. Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary for 1990 is a worthy adaptation, if for no other reason than Fred Gwynne's iconic performance. And though neither has aged particularly well, The Stand and It were made into ambitious, Heart in the Right Place TV miniseries. Which, and I think that's a good way to say it. They I think there's an I don't want to say it's nostalgic for me, but like maybe it is nostalgia. Nostalgia allows me to watch those and enjoy the hell out of them, even though I know in my heart that they're not particularly good by today's standards.
The big thing for me,
like Tim Curry really helps elevate it. I think if you didn't have him, it would. But like The Stand, what can you say elevates that though? Like there's no specific person where you're like, this person makes this a fucking all-star thing like it.
Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan. That is what I know him as, by the way.
It's Lieutenant Dan.
Gary Sinise.
Lieutenant Dan played East Texas.
Yeah, indeed. But like, for me, Flag, that's still what I picture is Jamie Sheridan from The Shining or The Stand. That's just still like as hard as I try to like think about things like Gary Oldman as a fan or like the illustrations that we've had that I think are really cool looking. Or even Matthew McConaughey. It's just one of those things like I've spent well over a decade now, almost 2 decades, nigh on 2 decades, picturing Flag as that character from that miniseries. So it's like to change that is really hard.
Oh yeah, definitely. I definitely understand where you're coming from for that one. It's going to be hard to ever change who Larry is for me, or Stu. Yeah, you know, or
any of them. Tom Cullen.
Freaking, that's the next one I was going to say.
Yeah.
Imagine getting someone different to play Tom Cullen. Like that. That guy is Tom Cullen for me.
You know the great thing. Rob Lowe can still play Deaf and Dumb.
Yeah, no, and he looks the exact fucking same. Good God. Him and Keanu Reeves had to have found a fucking fountain of youth, I swear to God.
Or they're vampires.
I'm a vampire.
Now the question is, which is the lead vampire?
Of those two, Rob Lowe.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Has like the charm more. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Keanu Reeves is pretty charming.
No,
don't trust either of them.
Keanu Reeves isn't that as charismatic. You got to have charismatic. You got to be charismatic if you're going to be a leader.
Yeah. Let's see. Travis says James Wan is a great director. I hope he sticks to horror after the DC venture. Yeah, I'm interested to see what he does with Aquaman, and I'm like not opposed to like a director trying out new things, but like the selfish side of me would definitely say, yeah, sign me up for as many horror movies for him as you possibly can because he's done so great. Agamorphy says I would love to see a straightforward by the book Running Man reboot. Honestly, hold your breath because the way things are going right now, they're going to run out of things to greenlight. So eventually, we'll probably get it. Yeah. That's the way I'm looking at it anymore. Is like, man, like there's so many adaptations coming in
2022. Remake of Cujo, Children of the Corn.
Yeah,
Carrie for the 3rd time.
Yeah. I think Carrie's in the books now. I don't think they'll do that one again. I don't know. I didn't mind the new version. I mean, I love the classic still, but I didn't mind it. I thought it was all right. And then Cody says, just read this on Hush's IMDb. There's a quick shot of several books that the main character owns. Among them is Stephen King novel Revival, Under the Dome, and most notably Mr. Mercedes. Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then Cody says I'm listening to The Stand currently, going to follow up with the movie. Yeah, and I'm that same way. Like again, like even though it might be somewhat nostalgia, the first thing I do after reading The Stand is I go and watch the miniseries. Like that's just the 1-2 punch for me. And it does sound like I sent you a picture of that. I didn't get it for the show because it's not really, but the picture that Josh Boone Instagrammed, it was probably a couple weeks ago, with like multiple versions of The Stand, and he says time to start writing this or something along those lines. So they are now in full development. It is no longer backburnered. Josh Boone is working.
Yes, you did.
Josh Boone is now currently working on The Stand that will be coming out on the CBS All Access thing, which is, once they announced that, I'm like, okay, now I'm going to sign up for the damn thing. I'm a Trek fan, but like Discovery wasn't enough for me to sign up for their stupid service. But like once they announced The Stand, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll sign up. And then now they did the Picard show they just announced, where I'm like, you already had my money. Why are you trying to woo me even more?
They're making it so that you know that you spent your money well.
Yeah, If they didn't have it, if The Stand hadn't happened, they'd have it right now with Captain Picard. Because
I don't agree with this, but someone I made a picture on Reddit last night that was Luke Skywalker, and it said beloved character of 30 years finally shows back up in the series, and everyone hates him. And then it says Picard, and it shows Picard, and it says, "Hold my tea, Earl Grey, hot."
Oh man. Then the article goes on and says, but ask any constant reader and they'll tell you the same thing. They don't read King to get scared. They read him for the characters, the setting, and the story. And I think that I think we'd all agree with that. I think that like we talked about that before with like It. We talked not too long ago, a couple episodes back. about when you're about to embrace it, what comes to mind? You know, is it just the horror? Or is it the characters, the town, the events that happen, not necessarily just this horror stuff, but the apocalyptic rock fight, the building of the dam, like there's all kinds of stuff where it's just
the coming together quartet of the Losers Club.
Yeah, I mean there's just so much that like, and I feel like that's a good point there for the author of this article. And it goes on and says it speaks volumes that the only King adaptation to make an impact after 1983 were of the non-horror books like Stand By Me, The Shawshank Redemption, and Misery. What speaks even louder, however, is that director Rob Reiner and Frank Darabont, the minds behind these films, are also constant readers, whose adaptations hewed extremely close to the source material. Darabont longly identifies himself as a, quote, rabid and devoted fan, while Reiner named his Castle Rock Entertainment after one of King's favorite fictional towns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which every time I see Castle Rock Studios, I'm always just like,
hey.
Look at that.
Someone needs to make a tech corporation.
Yeah, no doubt. And
like the beginning of the Dark Tower.
The beginning of the Dark Tower, yeah, exactly.
And they need to use a damn turtle.
Well, we had it at the beginning of the movie. I mean,
someone needs to take that and make a movie studio.
Make it real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it goes on and says, today they're in good company, having previously interviewed Muschietti, Flanagan, and Hilditch. Upon release of their respective films, I began noticing a connecting thread coursing through each of them. They've been reading King their entire lives. Which, it doesn't surprise me with the kind of results that they've got versus maybe some of the other people in like the late 80s, early 90s that, I don't know how much of fans they were as much as they were maybe just people looking at it going, oh, this might work. This, and then maybe that's why some of the adaptations were far more like, I don't know.
True to the source material.
Untrue in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And then it goes on and says King's multiverse began spouting in earnest in the mid '80s when tomes like The Talisman and as it's blossomed in the intervening years became a source of perpetual fascination for constant readers. This sprawling, malleable world also has an impact on the current crop of King adaptations, who are treating the universe with more mythical touch than a winking one. And this is actually a really cool quote from Mike Flanagan, the guy that did Gerald's Game. He says, I wanted to take excellent care of my little corner of the King universe. I really so desperately wanted to kind of fire off little flares into the other areas of that universe that are already connected to this story, Flanagan told me. That's always good to see. I mean, I think we've seen that throughout. Now this is where we kind of get into a little bit with the Dark Tower. He says, contrast it with the Dark Tower, Sony's failed attempt to explicitly bring King's expanded universe into the big screen, and it's a sole misfire amongst King's recent adaptations. On the surface, Nikolai Arcel's film functions similarly to many of the 80s and 90s era King adaptations, with the author's plot mostly cast aside in favor of molding a story into that of a modern-day blockbuster.
Holy shit.
And it says were this a different era, it may have actually been a huge success, which, I never really thought about that before. But, it does actually fit more in line with some of those earlier in that way, versus like, and it made me wonder, like, has any of this King's, because I feel like we both still enjoy the movie, but I feel like where we're at now with it versus where we were coming out of the theater the day it came out is maybe a little bit different, maybe a little bit cooler. And could that be impacted because of all the other stuff we've been seeing King adaptation wise?
It's absolutely true. Yeah. 100% going to be. I'm convinced that,
because you get a little bit bummed where you're like, as good as it was, as much as I enjoyed the movie, like, dude, if they would have just
if they had gone, that's what I was saying earlier. They'd gone balls to the wall like they did with it, rated R, a little bit truer to the source material. Give us something that Dark Tower fans can go, yeah, that was Dark Tower. The full on, that was Dark Tower.
Yeah.
Not just the creed that's taken word for word, but give us, deeper meanings and stuff like that we needed to show us that it was an extension of the tower.
Yeah. But here's a question that I still wonder is if they had just gone balls to the wall, straight adaptation wise, do you think it would have been a success? Because the thing is, it doesn't have the same built-in audience. We just talked about that a little bit ago.
Yes.
So do you think it would have been more successful? I mean,
more successful.
It would have been more loved by like across the board. I think book readers would have loved it, and like you see like higher Rotten Tomato scores and stuff. But would it have made money had it been a straight adaptation, knowing that it is more of a niche Stephen King thing? Therefore, the larger audience, it's even more niche. Would it be successful?
Give me a straight up. You got to clarify things here. Straight adaptation of what? Book one?
Probably
book
book
two?
one.
Book one.
Yeah.
straight adaptation of book 1 fleshed out into a 2-hour movie. You don't even have to go 2 hours for book 1.
Yeah.
Or maybe you do, and you just go a little bit into the Western Sea where Roland gets attacked, and you leave it on a little bit of a cliffhanger, wanting people wanting more.
Yeah.
Lose the fingers, get poisoned. There's your end of your movie.
Yeah.
You know, there's your introduction to a world, and say, okay, you know, book 2 movie is coming in a year or two.
Yeah.
You know, make that like they did with It, where it's like, we're going to greenlight it if this succeeds.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to leave it to where it can continue. You know, I think back to like episode 4 for Star Wars. George Lucas picked episode 4 because it had a good enough ending to stand on its own if that's the only one he ever got to make.
Yeah.
If they had done that with Dark Tower and they had made a movie with enough guts to do it rated R, to do it true to the source material, are you asking if it would have made more money than It or more money than what it did?
More, would it have been a success in and of itself?
Oh, absolutely would have been a success.
You think so?
I 100% agree. I think that it would.
Like I said, I think it would be more like of a critical success, but money-wise, there's still part of me that wonders, do enough people know about Dark Tower? And if it was a straight adaptation, could it be marketed in a way to get enough people that know nothing about it to go in and watch it?
Here's where
that's what I don't know.
Here's
yet.
where
really
this
don't.
article proves where I think that it kind of proves a little bit to my side of the argument that it would. When people went and saw the adaptation, and many of our fans were the ones saying this as well, wasn't close enough to the source material.
Yeah.
What is this article saying? The ones that are being successful are the ones that are staying close to the source material.
Yeah.
So I think that if we got critic reviews saying, wow, this is really close to the source material,
Yeah.
I think a lot more people would have been like, oh, so this is a lot like this and this and this. Okay, well, let's go see it.
Here's the only thing that I would say, though, is most of these that we've mentioned outside of It are TV adaptations. And not only that, a lot of them are on streaming services, which then don't have to worry about things like ratings. Like Netflix, for instance, doesn't let people know whether something's really successful
What
or
their
not.
metrics are, yeah.
Yeah, so it really comes down to, like, there is a far bigger... we don't know, like, as much as they're critically acclaimed things like Gerald's Game 1922, 11/22/63, we don't really know what they're... It's apples and oranges, and it's like a covered orange. We don't even know what the orange looks like to know would those have been financially successful. It's tough to say. So I think that would be my only caveat to what you said. But although I agree with what you're saying, I think it would have been critically successful. And I think in my opinion,
the sole fact that you're saying that it would be critically successful, if you have some of those reviewers who, instead of never reading a Stephen King, going to review it, and I think that's one of the reasons why we got those people, is because we didn't get a Stephen King fan going to review it like we did with It.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that what they did is, and he said it perfectly in this, and I can't remember how he said it word for word. You can read it back to me to make sure I get it close enough. Is that instead of staying close to the source material, they made it a Hollywood budget.
Yeah.
On a Hollywood film.
Yeah, to try to make it a Hollywood blockbuster.
Yeah, exactly. If they hadn't done that, if they had made the Dark Tower movie based on Stephen King's writings and stuff like that, and Nikolai Arcel had the handcuffs taken off, I truly believe it would have been a success. Not to the level of It, because like you said, you're 100% correct about that had a fan base built, not only in the miniseries, but the book as well.
Yeah.
There is a fan base built there that Dark Tower can't rival, because it's never been on film before. Ever, in any different media. But I think it would have been a very good starting point for a series. And Sony dropped the ball on that. I'm willing to admit that now, that Sony dropped the ball on the Dark Tower movie.
Yeah, as much as we enjoyed it, for what it was. Like, I think that's but it is definitely an interesting, because like I guess the fear I would have is like, because something could be a critical success and be a financial failure. I mean, for God's sake, Shawshank Redemption didn't do well in box office figures. It was critically successful. I had it like whatever. Also, because I guess the danger would be, in my mind, the scary thing as a fan would be, as if it came out, it was critically successful, but it shit the bed box office wise. And then it just became a cult movie where over the years people might, like Blade Runner, people come to it and it has a small audience, but never going to be big enough really. I mean, yeah, of course, Blade Runner did finally get a sequel 30-something years later, which didn't do well. It didn't make a lot of money.
Financially wise, no. Critically, yes.
Critically, exactly. But so it's like, but it did take, like, I would hate to see a Dark Tower movie that was really good, but then it's a cult movie, and then we might have to wait 20, 30 years to see, like, anything more brought to it. Like, I guess that to me, like, I'd almost prefer going the route we've gone and get the TV show versus like just getting a straight adaptation and then see it kind of flounder financially, but and be one of these things where it's got an 88% Rotten Tomato score, but it's one of those things that didn't make enough money that they're not going to do a sequel, and we're forever just going to be talking about the one movie. That's just in my head a little bit.
I see. The thing is that I look at it as, like you took your chances trying to go the blockbuster way to try and make a summer movie to where you can make money and everything like that. And hopefully it spawns a series and makes sequels.
Yeah.
Sony absolutely lied when they said they wanted to make this a tentpole series. When you want to make this a tentpole series, you got to stay true to the source material. It's simple as that. I mean, Harry Potter was close enough to the source material that it made Warner Brothers a shit ton of movie.
Yeah,
a shit ton of money. Sorry,
yeah, in multiple movies,
and you look
and
at
still making the movies,
and still making movies. I mean, we got a new one coming out now that November. Yeah, we got another Harry Potter movie coming out in November. That's a second prequel.
Yeah,
I mean, how many movies do you know that has a second prequel?
Star Wars.
It's true.
Rogue One.
Okay. Name 5 more.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true. I mean. Yeah, Yeah, definitely.
One thing I wanted to bring up here, I think it's Agamor Fee. Think on this: how DT movie would it have fared without SK identification, like Stand By Me or Shawshank? I don't know if that would have been entirely possible in this day and age. I think it's a little bit different in the 80s and early 90s.
Because you control the marketing.
Because you can control the marketing.
Today with the internet and stuff, like every blogger out there would be instantly saying like, the Stephen King
adaptation of the Dark Tower movie.
Yeah. So that does change it. But to go to that thing, let's just pretend that it came out in the 80s. How successful do you think it might be without any Stephen King branding in the 80s when that could have been possible? It's an interesting question.
I think that's where if they had done it as a film or as a short run TV series like they did with The Sand, 5 or 6 parts for the first novel, I think it's possible. Yeah.
Okay, so let me finish this. Oh, and then also from the chat, Magnus mentioned in one screenplay started with Shardik attacking. He says that would have ruled. I believe that was actually one of the early Ron Howard ones when they were trying to sell it as like a in a multi-$100 million movie when it was going to be like a starting middle of the story, and it would have started at Shardik and then like somehow went from there. I'm not sure exactly how, but yeah, I'm familiar with, I think it's even been brought up multiple times in some of the articles that we talked about where like maybe even Ron Howard himself in interviews has talked about like, our original idea, it was going to start like this, and whether that script has been fully out there, I don't know, but yeah, that is definitely the early Ron Howard one when they were trying to sell it to Warner Brothers, I think.
Yeah.
I think is what it was when it was that era, like around the 2012-ish, somewhere in that realm, I think. So it would have been my guess.
Javier Bardem?
Russell Crowe. It was before they moved to Javier Bardem, yeah. So it probably would have been 2012, then it would have been earlier than that, because
2009, 2010.
Somewhere in that realm, yeah. Yeah, probably right in there somewhere.
Back before this podcast existed.
Yeah. And then let's see, is there anything else I'm missing in the chat here? Magnus agrees with what Agamorphy said. Yeah. So, and then let me get back over here to the article. It says, but for a generation raised on King, the lazy, offhanded nods to Cujo and It, which along with the film's abundance of supplementary King references, demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the multiverse and felt appropriately shameless, which is an interesting thing. Then he goes on and says, it didn't appeal to newcomers or King fans. And the film's domestic gross failed to recoup its $60 million budget. And he says critics pondered over the secret to adapting King, who, despite being a sure thing for publishers, often flounders on the big screen. The answer is deeply held appreciation and understanding that horror is a facet of King, not the whole package.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting, like, this kind of had a few of those lines where I'm just like that's like a definitive thing, and that's true. Like, yeah, it's horror can never be the whole package for King, otherwise you failed. You've misunderstood, because King doesn't write that way. Nothing he's ever written has been straight horror. There's always more involved.
Absolutely.
So if you're trying to take his thing and make it purely about horror, you're going to end up being one of the ones that gets thrown in the $5 bin and not remembered, versus something like It. Like, there's people, I remember multiple people I took to see It. I saw it multiple times. And a few of them walked out going, man, that didn't even really feel like a horror movie. You know, and like, how often did you hear that from multiple people? Didn't you too?
I said it when I walked out.
And it's like, I still think back on it, I'm like, I can't categorize that as a horror, but the book isn't. So it's like, I love it. That's perfect. It captured exactly the It book, because the It book is not a horror book either. It's horrifying beyond all imagination at certain points, but that's not the heart of that story. So yeah, it's interesting. Then he goes on and says, whether this lesson will reflect in the future adaptations is yet to be seen, but there will be plenty of opportunities. James Vanderbilt, the screenwriter behind the Amazing Spider-Man movies, is currently prepping for his adaptation of King's The Long Walk. The writer behind A Quiet Place are making a 1978 short story, The Boogeyman. German filmmaker Faith Akin is remaking Firestarter. Novel.
What?
Yeah, I thought we talked about that.
Did we?
Yeah, I thought I told you about that already.
No. Firestarter. Dude, I love Firestarter.
Yeah, I thought we had already talked about it. They're doing an adaptation.
I don't remember us talking about that.
Yeah, I thought we did. Maybe I forgot.
You're terrible. Hashtag Tad is terrible. You know that's one of my favorites.
I thought we talked about it. I really did thought we talked. I thought 100% that we had brought that up on the show. See, that's why I'm glad I read articles like this, because it sometimes fills in holes
I'm
that
still
got missed.
not allowed to, all right?
Well, no, I'm just saying that's why I grab articles like this, because I mean, this touches on Dark Tower, but it's not 100% Dark Tower related. Then it goes on and says, novelist and the Wire writer Richard Price is turning King's latest, this year's The Outsider, into a TV series. Hell, some guy's adapting a narrative poem that King wrote.
Wait, what?
He doesn't give it many details on that, but yes, apparently someone's doing a narrative poem that King wrote as an adaptation, which is definitely
I'm googling that.
That's a bold move. That indeed. Then it finishes up here. It says the list goes on, and with every new entry, the myth of King takes on richer and more mystifying dimensions. 45 years into his career, the creator's shape continues to shift. And that's so I think that was a cool article. I feel like it had some really good hit points of like kind of solidifying some things in my mind about stuff. And it's an interesting thing to see, and I really can't wait to see what more of these constant readers do with their adaptations. I think I'm more excited now for King stuff than I've ever been in my life, to be honest with you. Like,
I know, right?
All this stuff that's coming out, man. I just can't wait to see a lot of it.
What are you most excited for in the next
It Part 2 for sure.
It Part 2
is probably the biggest, just because like
close the circle. I
mean, yeah, now that we have like the full cast listing and stuff, like I just really can't wait to see what we see in that movie.
According to this is bloodydisgusting.com. Deadline reports today that King's The Bone Church, a poem, is being adapted.
Huh, interesting.
That was on February 23rd, 2018.
Stephen Cody says, "Oh, Peter, I thought you knew." I swear we've talked about that, man.
Maybe it's just been so long that I forgot.
Yeah, because not that there's not a million projects to like clutter up your mind. Because we did an episode at one point where I did an article that basically went through and listed like at the time all of the adaptations that were in the works. And I want to say there was like not that episode, but it was like a couple, like the next episode or so is when Firestarter got announced that they were going to do a new version of it. So I don't know. Either way, now you know. Whether you knew or not before, you know now.
So this says that the poem is being adapted into a television series.
Interesting.
You want me to send you the link for this, or?
No, I think that's probably all we need.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Again, one more time, just so everyone hears it. The Bone Church, a poem the horror master wrote in the 60s. Holy shit.
Yeah, interesting. So that's an old one then. That's like back, would that be his college era, probably? Because he was young when he got Carrie put out. So yeah, that probably would have been in his college years.
Agamorphy says, King is a lousy poet. No.
Okay, now here's one that we're getting close to the end. I think we can get through this. We'll probably have to say,
dude, when's the last time that we didn't get through all the news?
It's probably movie time period. Back when the movie was hitting us really hard with a lot of stuff. Okay, so this one is titled, Does the Dark Tower Exist in Castle Rock Universe? And this is from James Greerby from Inverse, and it was written on July 25th, 2018. So right about the time that this hit the day after the first 3 episodes dropped for Castle Rock. And this starts off, it says, Castle Rock is a brand new tale set in a horrifying universe of Stephen King created. But while references to Shawshank, Cujo, or other more earthly terrors are easy to spot in the Hulu series, some of the author's most epic, iconic creations aren't so obvious. What's canon in the Castle Rock universe? Is the Dark Tower, King's sprawling 8-book magnum opus, part of Castle Rock world?
Use of the magnum opus there. I gotta give you props.
He did, not me.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were giving me crap.
Props to you for using it.
Yeah.
I always give you crap for it, but
yeah. And then wait, what does Cody say here? We need a Gantt chart, or maybe a Gantt chart for King adaptations. Yeah, no kidding, man. We just need like the old days news bulletins, with like all the stuff on the walls and stuff. Keep up with them all.
yeah, right.
Okay, then this article goes on, and this is a quote, and it says, "We would never want to treat the material that we love as something to just ignore." The showrunner Dustin Thompson, it's spelled weird, but Thompson, I think, tells Inverse, suggesting that he and fellow showrunner Sam Shaw are taking a holistic approach to King's library when it comes to canon, with a catch. They made some changes as part of the adaptation process. Yes, but canon is fluid even within the fiction of the King's novels. Then this is another quote. It said, "There's a great moment in the dark half when Alan Pangborn, which is a character in 11/22/63, or in Castle Rock. If you guys haven't watched yet, you may not know that, but he's in there, played by the amazing Scott Glenn.
Woot.
And it says Alan Pangborn buries the evidence that there was an evil doppelganger murdering all of these people, and favors a naturalistic explanation, which is what the rest of the town believes. Thompson says, whatever aspects of canon there are, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has the same point of view of what happened. So basically, that's not really going to come up in the show, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen, because maybe we're just seeing the cover story is basically what.
And that was what they're talking about there is not what happened in Castle Rock. That happened in the dark half.
The dark half, yeah.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. And then this article goes on and says, so while aspects of most of King's stories did take place in the fiction of Castle Rock, the way that they were perceived totally alters their reality. It's a nuanced approach to canon, one that helps prevent Castle Rock from being a shallow game of spot the Easter egg. But come on, yes or no, is the Dark Tower in Castle Rock? It's a good way for him to write that there, because there's a little nuance here, but let's get down to it here. And then here's a quote. It says, once you go to the tower, there's no going back, Shaw says, explaining that the tower totally changes the scale and, quote, the laws of storytelling physics. Which, I think we can get behind that. And then Magnus says, he was in Needful Things as well, right? Yeah, I believe he was. I believe he's showed up in a couple different things now. So for him, I really feel like he's probably the big hitter for crossover into Castle Rock. I feel like so far everything else we've had has been fairly self-contained. But I think he's the big one where it's like, oh yeah, shit, this is a dude that showed up in a number of books that is now in this show. So obviously at a different time period too, because I think the show has taken him. Scott Glenn is obviously not a young buck anymore, so this has taken the previous sheriff as a far older man. And this goes on and says, however, that's not to say that Dark Tower or some other cosmic scale force like the Tower couldn't appear in Castle Rock. Shaw says that escalating the scale of the story is one of King's hallmarks, citing how The Stand begins as a fairly grounded story about a pandemic, but at its end is a quote, epic, operatic story about the balance between good and evil, almost quasi-religious, end quote. It begins with some kids running away from a scary clown, or no, okay, I'm sorry, because that was the beginning of a sentence. The book, It, begins with some kids running away from a scary clown, but ends up being them performing a ritual and communicating with a turtle god, which is definitely an interesting way to put it, but it's true. It does elevate. And then another quote here says, that's true of so many of the books. I think that's true to a certain extent of this season of storytelling, Shaw said, teasing something grand for the end of Castle Rock season 1. And then another quote, we're going to have to be a little bit tight-lipped about the Dark Tower in that sense, but there's sort of no going back once you invoke the big mythology of the Dark Tower.
Ooh.
So, that's interesting. Then he goes on. Then the article goes on and says, Castle Rock season 1 might even take viewers to some surprising places, but by the time the 10th and final episode ends, their questions will have been answered. So that's not a quote, but it sounds like he probably got that information from these guys saying that. And I don't know, did we make it clear that Castle Rock is going to be an anthology show, that there will be multiple seasons, but it will in no way connect with season 1, it sounds like. So season 2 will be another thing completely, but within the
Oh,
Stephen King.
I don't know if we actually talked about that because I didn't know that.
Okay, so yeah, so season 1 will wrap, will have a bow. There will be a season 2. Will be in the Stephen King universe, but it'll probably be a completely different set of characters, completely different story. So that's something to know.
Wizard in Glass?
No, that's the Dark Tower thing with Amazon, right?
Gunslinger? Drawing of the Three?
Oh, then it goes. Then
Jericho Hill.
Then it ends with a quote here. It says, "We always looked at this story as self-contained, original Stephen King novel for television." Shaw explained, saying that while characters from season 1 could appear in future season, and in parentheses it says, which might be more epic in scale to begin with, this first tale will have its own resolution. So,
yeah.
And honestly, I wonder if some of this is marketing a little bit because the way Lost kind of went off the rails. And this is one of JJ's big returns to television since Lost. Yeah. So I wonder if in some ways they're trying to make people know, like, hey, don't worry, we're not going to lost you here. Like, this is going to get,
you're not going to get lost.
This is going to have a resolution. But, yeah. Let's see. Did we miss anything else in the chat?
The Chris showed up.
Oh, Chris. Awesome.
No, not Chris. The Chris. All right. It's the Chris.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Welcome to the show. So let's see. We got, you know what? We skipped one. There's one other one I wanted to get into here. We still have some time.
Okay.
This one is, just came out a couple days ago, yesterday, actually, as a matter of fact. So I thought it was interesting.
August 10th, for those of you listening to the podcast, is what Tad's talking
about. In the future, yeah. I guess that's true. The title of this one, Idris Elba describes the challenge of bringing diversity to characters in Thor and the Dark Tower. Josh Weiss is the author from Sci-Fi on August 10th, 2018. And let's see, it starts off here. It says, the last August, Nikolai Arcel's adaptation of the Stephen King Dark Tower series of books debuted to a negative review and less than modest return in the worldwide box office. Fan of King's beloved Western horror, fantasy, sci-fi, fiction mashup are sorely disappointed. Even with 2 major stars, Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey, playing Roland Deschain and Walter Paddock, the Man in Black, respectively. The movie failed partially because it tried to cram too many ideas from the Dark Tower book into 95 minutes, which just isn't enough time to do any of them justice. The bare bones narrative to the PG-13 rating didn't help either. However, while chatting with Empire magazine for a publication September issue, which is why we're covering it from Sci-Fi, not from Empire, because this article is not dropped for Empire yet, so I can't get access to it. So we're just kind of having to get this kind of secondhand. So that's not my preference, but that's what we have to do in this case. And it says, Elba also stated that the casting a black man as a gunslinger was a huge hurdle for the adaptation. And then this is a quote here from Mr. Elba. It says, it's disheartening to disappoint an expecting audience, which is definitely an interesting thing to say. And it kind of, like, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer to have to say that, I guess, for him. But because he didn't disappoint everyone. I hope he knows that. And then he goes on and says, then it says, said the 45-year-old actor/director. And then the quote continues, the Dark Tower fans are super loyal, and it's not literature you could just futz. It's very deep, and people commit long periods of time to read those books. So for a movie to come out and blanket some of it, that's disappointing. I knew going in, based on the iconography of the character, that I was going to face a challenge from the audience's expectations, because in the book he's got blonde hair, blue eyes, and looks like Clint Eastwood. So yeah, and we've talked about that, but it's interesting to hear now from his perspective, kind of looking back on it. And then it goes like, let's see. Then it goes on here. Another quote. I did get a sense that when it was announced that there was a what, I'd faced that before with Heimdall. Heimdall was essentially a Norse god, and there aren't that many Africans in Norse mythology, he said. Ha! But it turned out that the reinvention of Heimdall was a great, innovative bit of artistic license. But Dark Tower, the expectations for the film were just so huge.
Yeah.
That's Idris again talking, which is definitely interesting. And then he goes on and says, but even with fans, or no, this isn't a quote now, this is just the article again. But even with fans not liking the Dark Tower very much, Elba is totally up for another adventure as Deschain, which I think he's mentioned before in a certain way, but this is another quote for that. This is a quote, I would, yeah, because Roland Deschain is a deep man. It's deep. I would. but I'm not sure where they are with that. He said, which is basically coming down to like he doesn't know where everything stands. And then the article closes out saying Amazon is currently developing a series based on King's book alongside other fantasy sci-fi books like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Larry Niven's Ringworld and Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. So it's kind of interesting. Not necessarily that we have to go too deep into that conversation because we've talked about it ad nauseum in the past with like the race change, but it's just it was interesting to me to see Idris talking about it. And I feel like even just like him understanding that like maybe some of the disappointment coming from how the movie treated certain things. Yeah. Like he talked about, like the Dark Tower fans are super loyal and it's not literature you can just futz. It's deep and people commit long periods of time reading the books. So for a movie to come out and kind of blanket some of it, it's disappointing. So it's interesting with that because that's kind of showing me like he's empathetic towards the people that weren't necessarily keen on it. So that's interesting to me for sure. And he talks about the challenge of, who Roland is prior to the casting and versus who Idris Elba is. So that's awesome. I thought that was kind of cool. That was a short one. So that's all we got for that. I'll still say it, man. If Idris wants to play him, I'm down for him to always play him because I love Idris Elba. The talk's getting really heated right now for him to potentially be the next Bond, which I'm totally down for as well. Because I told someone over text, a friend from work, and I said, is there any person right now alive that's British, that's classier, more debonair, more gravitas than Idris Elba right now? I will admit, at 45, he's kind of old for the Bond role. But is there anyone else there that just encompasses the Bond perspectives more than Idris We
I can't think of one.
I just feel like he's just, even if it's only sign him up for the Timothy Dalton. Give him 2 movies, then he can retire because we don't want to get into the whole 60-year-old James Bond like we had in the 1980s.
Yeah,
but,
no kidding.
But I would love to. Yeah, I'm just a huge, unabashed fan of Idris Elba. Have been since The Wire. Love him in like everything he's done. I loved him in Heimdall, and I think a large part of the reason I like Heimdall in the Thor movies is because of Idris Elba. I feel like he really brought some electricity to that role. So
yeah, he did.
Yeah. So that's all we got. I really didn't skip much. The only thing I really skipped was Time did a thing, 7 books to read while you're waiting for the next George R.R. Martin book. And Dark Tower is one of them. So all it really was a synopsis of the Dark Tower series and telling people to read book 1. And I just thought it was kind of cool, if nothing else, that it was brought up in Time magazine. The Dark Tower is listed in there.
Yeah.
Maybe we can see some new readers coming from that. So
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, did I miss anything else in the chat here? Let's see, Agamorphy. I haven't watched Castle Rock yet, but I have some of the chatter via the net on that the show isn't scary. Maybe they will get there gradually. I will say, I don't think it's overly scary, but there's been some moments that are fairly King-ish.
More thriller than scary.
Yeah, I'd say more thriller. There's a lot of mystery going on, but I think there's a few different moments I could think of that were like definitely where I was just like, okay, yeah, this feels like King, the horror King, even though I know it's not all about that. And honestly, I'm digging the characters, like that article we just covered a little bit ago. Yeah, it really comes down to not the horror is the main event, but the horror is there. Yeah, and honestly, when it comes to the main event, the character, the setting, everything that's involved, I'm fucking loving it. I'm really digging it. Like, so probably tonight after we get home from watching this movie, I'll probably end up watching it tonight just so I'm caught up. But yeah, it's really good. So that puts us at about time actually. So we didn't really get any emails, but we're actually really caught up on emails. We still have some to read, so don't be afraid if yours hasn't been read yet. I'm just saying in terms of how far behind we've been the last, basically most of this year and into last year. This is the closest we've been to caught up. I think we have less than 10 emails to get through now, and including some new ones that have come in recently. So I'm not super worried about emails because we're doing good on that. Finally.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yeah, totally. And we love it. So keep sending your emails. And if there's anyone out there that's been holding off emails because we're behind, feel free to send them. We'll definitely get to them. And there's a lot of cool conversations to have with some of these future emails in the future. But next time will be a book club because this is our second roundtable. So we'll be back to Mr. Eddie Dean.
My boy.
We have finished the shootout, right? Now, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, we finished the shootout. So now we get to deal with what happens next. And that's where we're going to be picking up with the roundtable next time. So let's go ahead and give you guys, especially if you're new, you may not know this, some of the stuff that we gave you at the top of the show. First of all, if you want to find the show notes, you can do that at darktowerpalaver.com. All the articles that I covered will be on there.
One last thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hopefully not everyone stopped listening. There's 2 more references to Roland's hat in the Dark Tower series.
Oh, all right. Go on.
In book
Hat
5.
Watch. I forgot
Hat
about
Watch.
Hat Watch.
We forgot about Hat Watch. I forgot to text you about it.
I did forget about Hat Watch.
It's mentioned in book 5 one more time. It's actually described. Eisenhart gives him a hat and describes the type of hat that it is. I wish I would have written it down. I was driving when I was listening to it, so I didn't go back and get it.
Yeah.
And then also it talks about in book 7 that he loses the hat in the shootout. If I remember right, if that's the second one.
Okay.
Again, driving, not able to take notes.
Yeah.
But there was 2 more references to Roland's hat throughout the series.
You know, a lot
so
of times,
only like 4 or 5 times do they talk about it.
If I get to those things personally, I'll stop my thing. I'll like pull the headphone plug or hit pause and just wait and just not listen to anything the rest of my drive if I have to.
Oh, really?
If I want to get something, because I know that I won't remember by the time I get home or whatever. Yeah, that's my way. I'm not saying you have to do that, but let's see. Agamorphy says feels like Twin Peaks the way that you describe it, Peter. Yeah, I've never been huge into Twin Peaks. Not necessarily that I don't like it. I've just never given it the kind of attention that it deserves. I haven't watched the new one at all yet. But yeah, I'm interested in it. I know it's getting a lot of reviews as a pretty great show. And
I've never seen it.
yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about Castle Rock. Everyone should give it a whirl. If you have Hulu, definitely hit it up. There's no reason not to. If you don't have Hulu, I don't know.
Wait till the series is out. Sign up for a free 7-day trial and watch it.
Yeah, we'll let you guys know when the final episode hits. And at that point, yeah. I do that same thing with like Showtime. Like I love Homeland, but it's like, and I'll buy the Blu-ray when it comes out. But dude, those ones, it's like the worst show I've ever watched because like the Blu-rays, there's been times that it'll go to where almost midway through the next season before the Blu-ray drops. I've never seen that before, and it's just one of those things where I'm like, did they stop doing Blu-rays for Showtime? And then it finally came out, and I was just like, wow. That's like the longest I've ever seen. Because some shows
usually it comes out right before the new season starts.
Yeah, some of them sidle it right up close there where you don't even have time to watch the whole season before the new one starts. But yeah, this one is like beyond that. I'm like, whoa. So like there's part of me that's like the new season that I think it just ended. So it's like I'll probably get a Showtime subscription and then over a weekend just binge the whole season. That's the way to do it, man. You gotta milk those free trials.
I did that with Hulu last year for 11/22/63.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, darktowerpalaver.com. Check out the articles that we mentioned. I do, even though some of those I went more at length with, especially that first one. But if you want to read the whole articles, including the stuff that I didn't really touch on, go ahead and hit the show notes. Also, if you could subscribe to us on iTunes, and if you could rate and review us as well, we would love that. Also, you could stream us on Stitcher. And if you want to be part of the show, like we had a number of people in the chat this time, there's multiple ways to be involved, whether it's real time or in the future. I don't know how that works. Like sending an email, I guess. I don't know what I was saying. Go on.
You can email us at darktowerpalaver@gmail.com.
Don't give me that look.
Or you can reach out to us on social media through Facebook. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. You can also tweet us, and remember, if you tweet, that's mostly Tad. I'm mostly on Facebook. So if you want to tweet Tad, it's at DarkTowerPod. That's at DarkTowerPod. We have our roundtables saved back catalog from when we started on YouTube.
And I think now it actually shows you the chat real time too. I think it like times it with
does
the
it? That's
video.
awesome.
So like you'll see the chat window on the right, because I think I've looked at like a live stream recently, and yeah, it actually does a thing to where like you'll like, so it keeps it lined up to where.
Oh, cool.
So people, if you're watching the videos or whatever, you'll be able to see who do we have: Agamorphy, Magnus, Chris, Cody,
the Chris.
Who else do we have? I know I'm missing someone. I feel Travis. Did I say Travis?
Boom.
So there's a bunch of people, but you'll be able to see all these guys talking as they talked, like real time.
Yeah.
So you're actually able to follow along with the chat as well as the video. That's something that YouTube didn't do in the old days. It always used to be just one of those things that like, if it still showed you the chat, you kind of had to just scroll through it and you may guess like when it matched up. But like now it actually lines up. So it's really cool. It's a huge upgrade for YouTube.
Yeah, and that's youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. Again, just a reminder, we can't put our book club episodes on there because of copyright issues, because of the sound clips we use from the audio.
Yeah, and subscribe to us on YouTube and join us live. We're really trying to get better with like giving you guys advance notice, and I think it really paid off today. It worked out to where we were able to get some of probably the biggest chat we've had in a number of episodes now. So we have more of a regular schedule, generally speaking. Today's was kind of off a little bit, but it worked out. But yeah, we'll keep you guys informed. Subscribe to our social media as well. I usually try to tweet and Facebook also saying, hey guys, here's the time to show up for the live recording. Because then you'll be like the people I just listed, and you could engage with us real time versus email that's not real time, is what I was trying to say earlier.
Yeah.
And you could chat with us, be part of the conversation as we say it versus like email, which don't, if you want to correct us on something, if you want to, which we do have some corrections in our mailbag, by the way.
Ooh.
If you want to correct us, if you want to engage in a conversation that we had during an episode with an email, absolutely do it. That's been some of our best discussions, is advancing, talking at length in one episode, having somebody bring it back up in a later episode with an email, and then going at it. It's been some of the greatest conversations. So
especially
don't hold
when
back,
it clarifies. Yeah, especially when it clarifies something for us. Because there's a lot of times where I look at Ted and say, hey, isn't this the way it is? And Ted goes, yeah, I think so. But we're completely off because we're human.
Yeah.
Cry your pardon, but we are.
Yeah.
You know, as much as Ted likes to believe that he's a demon.
You believe I'm a demon.
It's true. I have a lot of evidence supporting that statement, so let's not get into that anytime soon. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us. We love tangents. Tangents is our way of life.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, hit us up in any way, and we will see you guys next time as we join you guys back with a book club. If you're into those, we'll be recording that next time, and then after that, we'll be back to some roundtables, and we'll see. Hopefully, we'll have some green light news here soon. It feels like it should be coming pretty soon. I got a feeling about, I don't know.
There will be water if God wills it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. How dare you? All right, guys. See you next time. And as we always say, long days and pleasant nights.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.
All right. Stop the recording. And everyone here in the live chat, thank you guys for joining us.
You got to go read what your Chris wrote.
Let's see. Oh, Jim from Rhode Island just showed up too. Here toward the end. It's all right, though. You have almost a whole episode to watch. Let's see. I got to back up a little bit. Where are we talking here? Have you remembered the face of your fathers from Cody? I think so. And then Chris, long days and pleasant nights, flag fans, of course. Yeah.
Boo.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for joining us. It's been great. I always love it when we have a lot of people in the chat. It just feels like it engages the conversation a little bit more, and it gives it a new dimension. So thank you guys for joining us. And yeah, we will hopefully see you guys next time when we're here live. So until then, we'll tell you guys the same thing. Long days and pleasant nights, and yeah, go read or go watch some Castle Rock. Go read some Stephen King. If you haven't read The Outsider yet, still, even though we both read through it pretty quick, we haven't done the episode for it yet.
The Unfound.
We're still both stoked on it, and we still highly recommend it. And yeah, hit up Castle Rock and let us know what you guys think on all fronts. So see you guys next time.
Bye, guys.